Good afternoon, everyone. Quiet, please. We are about to begin. Good afternoon. Today is February 1st, the beginning of a new month. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. We are about to begin our public bill hearings. But before we do, I want to announce for everyone here and everyone who is listening to us, the Senate changed their sign-up time, which has caused some confusion. If you are testifying in the Senate or signing up to submit written testimony, their deadline is 1 day prior to your hearing. Here in the House, it is 48 hours. So we had a little bit of issues with that this morning with people being confused, and we worked with those folks because we understand that, but we just want to make sure everybody knows the rules. With that, I am going to call House Bill 119, and it is my bill, so I am going to let Madam Vice Chair take over the hearing, and she will call up my first panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to call up Joyce Lombardi, Mohammed Chowdhury, and Lisa Jordan, please, to testify. And Madam Chair, you can begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, committee, and everyone that is here. I am here today to ask for a favorable report on House Bill 119. I like to say it at the beginning because I usually forget to do that at the end. I have received, and you all have probably received, quite a few emails that, in my opinion, contain a lot of misinformation about what this bill actually does. The emails that I have received state it is not the school system's job to parent our kids. This bill does not do that. I do not want my kindergartner learning about sex. This bill does not do that. The bill overrides local control for the school boards. This bill does not do that. And this bill is indoctrination. Indoctrination of what? I don't know. But this bill is not an indoctrination bill. What this bill does is create a framework for local boards who will have the ultimate control of the curriculum and create an age-appropriate curriculum to include health promotion, mental and emotional health, substance abuse prevention, yes, family life and sexuality, gender identity and sexual orientation, safety and violence prevention, healthy eating, and disease prevention and control. The bill has an opt-out provision for parents who are not comfortable with the gender identity and sexual orientation topics, and the local boards are required for those kids, the local boards are required to provide alternative curriculum for those students. We are federally required to teach about HIV and AIDS prevention, so there's no way to get around that for folks who are uncomfortable with that. In conclusion, I would like to say that this updates our health curriculum for all different types of students. The health curriculum was created under the assumption that all students are heterosexual and cisgender, and this is not the case. This bill will allow students to explore topics that I previously mentioned and will provide teachers that will give the students accurate and medically correct information. Our children will become more educated under this as opposed to learning about these things on TikTok and YouTube. This bill will allow our state to be a leader in this front. And what I would like to say, and what I think most of you know, I am a mother. I talk about my three beauties all of the time. I spent 7 years on the Judiciary Committee, where the forefront of everything that I did was protecting children, protecting our children. I will continue to do the same thing as chair of this committee, and that's what I believe that this bill does. And with that, I will again ask for a favorable report on House Bill 119, and I would like to thank the state superintendent for his efforts, and I will turn it over to him. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Wilkins, and everyone else. The Maryland State Department of Education respectfully submits this testimony in support of House Bill 119, Primary and Secondary Education Comprehensive Health Education Framework established, which ensures a research-based, best-in-class, developmentally appropriate approach to health education across grade bands, protecting health education framework from a process in law that ensures that health education framework can remain free from subjectivity, bias, and adult politics. MSD has heard testimony at the State Board of Education meetings this year pertaining to the health education framework, testimony that calls for MSDE to better explain the difference between frameworks and curricula. So before I talk about what this bill is, let me first dispel the myths of what it is not. House Bill 119 is not a curriculum bill. A framework is not a curriculum. In fact, House Bill 119 enshrines parental rights to a process that ensures that their children have a developmentally and age-appropriate scientific research-based framework for health education within local education agencies, not the state, that they adopt their own local curriculum to best to deliver the tenets of the framework. House Bill 119 strengthens the process to meaningfully engage parents in the process of curricular adoption and codifies opt-out provisions for families. House Bill 119 requires LEAs to establish clear opt-out policies, guidelines, and procedures for family life, human sexuality, gender identity, and sexual orientation topics. It also requires LEAs to make arrangements for families who opted out their students to receive appropriate alternative learning activities. COVID-19 makes clear that parents and guardians must have opportunities to be part of the educational experiences of their child. Now, what is this bill? With regard to the framework itself, House Bill 119 will codify and protect the existing process by which MSDE and the Maryland Department of Health collaborated with a broad cross-section of stakeholders to develop the current state framework that LEAs use when making their own local decisions about the curriculum and instructional materials. Codifying these provisions in state law will ensure that the skills and curricular outcomes of the health framework remain tied to scientific, evidence-based practices. MSD and MDH align the framework to national and state standards and Maryland's legislative requirements to use data about Maryland's youth, along with scientifically and medically accurate information to identify essential health education skills at each grade level. This bill emphasizes the requirements of the comprehensive health regulation that currently exists by mandating LEAs convene a joint committee of parents or guardians, educators, health experts, and representatives of the local education community to review and comment on the instructional materials. We respectfully request that you consider this information as you deliberate House Bill 119.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. The next speaker can begin.
Thank you. I'm Joyce Lombardi. I am speaking here on behalf of Center for Hope. We are physically located in the district of Delegate Attar, and we serve all of Baltimore City. Comprehensive violence prevention, child abuse, human trafficking, violence intervention, and safe streets. And we support this bill for two reasons. One, we support that we understand it is a framework, and the suggested guidelines on secret, boundaries, and consent can help prevent child abuse and human trafficking. The second reason is not so obvious. 3 of the 8 standards that are in COMAR and that are in the suggested framework actually pertain to conflict resolution. And in those standards through K-12, in our written testimony, we cite 1D, which is public safety, but I also want to turn your attention to 1A, mental and emotional health, and 4, interpersonal communication. All of those have suggested K through 12 topics on conflict management. That is something that you know in this committee, that out there, our kids are not okay, certainly post-pandemic. There are increasing levels, stress, fights. Conflict management is something that has worked very well in Maryland about 20 years ago. There's good data from Ohio, there's good data from North Carolina, and this curriculum has some very important skills that could help our teachers and students go forward. It's not everything, but as we know from our restorative approaches, there is some good data that good conflict management, understanding stress in your body, understanding anger, interpersonal violence, empathetic communication can really help reduce suspensions, office visits, expulsions, fights, and so forth. For those reasons, we do urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next testifier can begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Lisa Jordan with the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We're also here in favor of House Bill 119. I always appreciate the opportunity to leave the Judiciary and Judicial Proceedings Committee. Thank you. You know, my colleague, Ms. Lombardi, said much of what I would have said, so I don't want to repeat that, but I do want to say that the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault is very much in favor of this, not only because you have family life and human sexuality, you have gender identity, and you have safety and violence prevention, all of which are things that are very important for ending sexual assault, preventing sexual misconduct, preventing sexual abuse, but also because House Bill 119 requires a comprehensive approach. And over the past several years, the General Assembly has passed pieces and entertained different bills on different issues. And it's been very helpful to do things like focus on the issue of consent. We've had proposals to focus on sexting. We've had proposals to focus on anti-human trafficking issues. But what's particularly helpful about House Bill 119 is it recognizes that children are whole human beings, and all of these things are interrelated. So when we're talking about consent, we're also talking about human sexuality. We're also talking about conflict resolution. We're also talking about all of the various things that kids need to do to help them feel confident in themselves and to really create safety. So we're really helping to support children and their health. And for those reasons, as well as the reasons mentioned by the previous witnesses, the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault supports House Bill 119 and urges a favorable report.
Thank you. Any questions for this panel? All right, seeing none, I will go ahead and call up the next few witnesses while the chair resumes her seat. Joyce Lombardi.
I already went.
Oh. Shirley Rivers. Oh, my apologies. I did miss a question, but could we get you on the next panel? Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. Melanie Shapiro and Pam Casemeyer.
Whenever you're ready, whoever would like to go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. My name is Shirley Rivers. I'm the program coordinator from Baltimore City Health Department. I oversee the YOSHI, which is the Youth Sexual Health Initiative through Baltimore City Health Department. We are in favor of Bill 119 for several reasons. We feel that this bill will fill the gaps in what we are missing on community and government levels when it comes to health literacy. Over the past 20 years, there's been numerous studies that consistently show that a comprehensive health education framework in schools, it doesn't encourage sexual activity to begin any sooner. It doesn't encourage sexual activity more often. As a matter of fact, there hasn't been any form of education that has been shown to effectively convince young people when to begin to start having sex. Now, on a professional level, my support for Bill 119 is because I work in a world where I have to tell 12 and 14-year-olds that they are HIV positive, and that is no fun. And so to have to deal with a 14-year-old who is HIV positive, who is going to go back in the community, who doesn't have the health literacy of how HIV is spread, that will incur a public health risk. If this bill is not supported, we feel like that type of education can get to those youth on an earlier level if there's some sort of comprehensive health education that can be across the board in school settings. Because by the time I see that youth, I don't know how many other young people are infected with HIV. I don't know how many people are pregnant and may have HIV. I also sit on the FEMR, which is the Fetal Infant Mortality Review Board, and there are several times we are reviewing fetal deaths from young people who don't have the health literacy to understand what pregnancy means, that their bodies are pregnant, what it means to be healthy during pregnancy. So I'm hoping that you will vote in favor of Bill 119. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shapiro?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's nice to be here, and it's nice to be able to say Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair. I am Melanie Shapiro. I'm the Public Policy Director with the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. MNADV is the federally recognized state domestic violence coalition representing the 19 comprehensive domestic violence programs in our state, as well as allied organizations, professionals, and individuals. And we are here in support of HB 119, and we have what will hopefully be some friendly amendments. First of all, just yesterday, in fact, there was an article in a national publication on the importance of teaching healthy relationships in schools and the role that it plays in reducing teen dating violence. And it is imperative that we be teaching children at a young age what healthy relationships look like and what they don't look like. And we can only do that by passing legislation such as this, requiring that there be a framework for that education in all of our schools. One of the areas we think that can be improved is how some of those relationships are formed. And as Ms. Jordan actually testified earlier, there have been a number of bills regarding specific parts of that, such as sexting or cyberbullying or trafficking. And drawing from those themes, we think incorporating language such as education on the safe and healthy use of technology and online communication to avoid violence and exploitation, and education on healthy and nonviolent relationships could only improve what must be taught to our young people in schools without telling them exactly what that curriculum needs to be. So for all those reasons, we urge a favorable report on HB 119.
Hello, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair. I'll repeat, it is nice to be able to say that, but I also will take a couple of my seconds and let you know I'm Pam Casemeyer. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Academy of Pediatrics, which is the pediatric community that has the expertise in many of these issues in terms of how to integrate them into child development. And I also wanted to say I really look forward to, I haven't met all of you who were recently elected, so we really look forward to working, I look forward to working with you on a number of issues. Now that I've used up my 30 seconds, I just wanted to let you know the Academy of Pediatrics is strongly in favor of this bill. We've heard specific support for certain kinds of provisions, but this is a very comprehensive framework. It's soup to nuts health education, but it is also evidence-based and age-appropriate. And that was something they pointed out in their conversation with each other, how important that is. And whether we like it or not, many of these topics people face, these children and adolescents face in their lives, whether they're comfortable sharing it, talking about it, knowing about it, having the ability to have the education in a framework where maybe they never say anything, they don't even talk, but they're hearing it, is incredibly important to help them learn to deal with these issues. I will say the Academy of Pediatrics has 2 amendment requests. One I would probably put in the technical realm. The other thing this bill does, which I wanted to mention, is it does require the local boards of education to have community involvement in the development of the curriculum, and it also references utilizing health experts and educational specialists. We'd like to see that health experts make sure it includes those who are practicing in the pediatric space, and that's their specialty. The bigger one is deleting the opt-out provisions, which they believe to be important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for any of these witnesses? I will just say to Ms. Shapiro and Ms. Casemeyer, if you haven't already, you may have, can you send our office the amendments that you testified to? Thank you very much. Now calling unfavorables. Melissa Eidelman, John Woolhams, Susie Scott, Tara Thompson, and William Martino. And whoever would like to go first, Mr. Woolhams, if you want to go first, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. John Woolhams, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, here today testifying in opposition to House Bill 119. As some on this committee are familiar and others will soon become familiar, MABE is a perennial presence in this committee in opposing curricular and assessment-related mandates in favor of what we refer to as in the context of the education arena. So it is not advocacy for carte blanche local discretion and autonomy, but local governance in the context of state law and regulation. We believe firmly that regulations adopted in 2019, as evidenced in the state framework that was finalized in 2021, does much, if not everything, that this legislation proposes to do. So that in that sense, the bill codifies much work that has already been done. So we certainly don't want to redo that work. Do want to emphasize that the framework is very comprehensive. My written testimony lists the groups, including the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Bloomberg School of Health and others who were represented in developing that framework. And so it is very up to date. And in fact, that is the source of much of the controversy at the local level with regard to implementing the framework through local curriculum. But I assure you that that local community engagement process is underway. It is subject to the review by the State Department of Education, Mr. Chaudhry and his office. And so we really urge an unfavorable on this bill in the context of we've already done the work to develop the framework in the education arena, and we're doing the work to implement it at the local level. And in that respect, the bill is not needed. Thank you.
Whoever would like to go next.
Yes, I'll go. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to provide parent perspective on HB 0119. While I fully understand and respect each person feels they are doing what is best for our children, I understand that we will not always agree. I have to say I completely opposed to this bill becoming law. While I still have to do a lot more digging into the framework, some portions of it, I did my best to educate myself about the gender and sexuality portions. I'm going to be honest, I'm worried. I'm worried for our children. I'm worried for our teachers. I'm worried for our administrators. I'm worried for our local communities, and I'm worried for our local BOEs. I will go into a little detail of these worries for our students, speaking from a recent experience of what I saw happen at my child's local high school. I can confidently say I see and feel this bill is a breeding ground for more of our most vulnerable children to be taken advantage of. I said to myself, wow, if this happens in my child's school, I'm sure it would happen much more. To provide a bit more perspective of what I'm trying to convey, some students were being influenced inappropriately by a teacher and adult in the name of General Sexuality Alliance Club. This teacher guided them to create utter havoc and chaos in our schools. It seems the school systems were able to take little or no action at first, or maybe they were just scared to take action right away. My next guess is maybe, and I hope is the case, is they are waiting for the outcome from the court case the teacher and the state of Maryland is pursuing against the parent for exposing what her allowed in her classroom. I cannot claim I know exactly what is going on in that situation, and I hope the parents find peace with some understanding soon. My thoughts now after this experience and reading this bill is as high schoolers, our oldest and most mature students, can be taken advantage and influenced inappropriately, what will happen to our kindergartners? What will happen to our middle schoolers? What about special needs kids or children with minor intellectual disabilities? I see groups advocating for special education children to be in the general population because they want other students to be mindful of these individuals' differences. But I fear for these groups if their advocacy battle wins and this framework becomes law in Maryland. I'm standing with Anne Arundel County Public Schools by not including gender ideology curriculum in K through 5.
Ma'am, if you could just state your name for the record and also so I can keep track of who all's come.
Sure, Melissa Eidelman.
Thank you. Whoever would like to go next.
I'll go. Hi, my name is Tara Thompson. I am here advocating as a mother of 3 boys, and I'm also here as the chair of Moms for Liberty, Baltimore County. I'm asking you to oppose HB 119. This bill would require all counties in Maryland to create an age-appropriate curriculum that is consistent with the comprehensive health education framework. This demolishes the power of the boards of education that includes elected officials and the input of parents, teachers, and community members. It seeks to override local control of what is taught in each grade. This top-down governance is not representative of a constitutional republic, such as our country. It violates the consent of the governed, cited in the Declaration of Independence, and is an absolute overreach of authority. This bill puts gender ideology directly into our children's curriculum and forces this belief onto all children. It's abusive and harmful, especially for a child who may not have those same family values and beliefs. Furthermore, it adds to the constant promotion of systemic racism, oppression, and intersectionality. This is already scattered throughout the curriculum in every grade, an ideology that only creates division among student populations and families. Families in Maryland are already seeing this division happen. This bill is an absolute violation of parental rights, fundamental rights to direct the education, moral formation, and medical care of our children. I'll leave you with this. Gender is referenced within the 75-page framework 36 times. Sex is referenced in the 75-page framework 173 times. Why is talking about sex with adults at work considered sexual harassment, but talking with kindergartners about sex in school is considered necessary? I beg you to oppose HB 119. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you and the gentleman could flip-flop seats, that would be good. And then if you would like to go next, the woman, you want to go next?
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Susie Scott. I'm with Moms for Liberty, Harford County. We have 9 chapters of Moms for Liberty in Maryland right now and growing. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I come to ask for an unfavorable report on House Bill 119. This bill is a violation of parents' fundamental rights to direct the education, moral formation, and medical care of their children. It goes too far in mandating a radical agenda under the guise of a comprehensive health education framework. This framework has been met with a large uproar of protests from parents across the state. Gender ideology has no place in our public schools, especially in the education of our earliest learners in pre-K and elementary school. By giving the Maryland Department of Education and the State Health Department authority to jointly develop standards and guidelines for school health programs, you are abrogating the role and responsibility of our local boards of education. The legislation further empowers the state and county health departments to provide adequate school health services. This vague wording leaves the door wide open to extremist groups like Planned Parenthood to set up shop in our public schools. Family life curriculum that moves beyond instruction in the human reproductive process, as this legislation does, to mandating the teaching and promoting of sexual practices like anal and oral sex to middle schoolers, has no place in our school system. This legislation is an affront to parents' rights. It is a brazen attempt to codify radical ideology in our public schools, and it must be defeated. This bill will not do anything to advance academic excellence, but it will contribute to the further decline of academic test scores, as well as a decline in respect for human life. I come here today to ask you to affirm parents' fundamental rights over the education of their children and give an unfavorable report to House Bill 119. Thank you.
Thank you, and you have to be Mr. Martino,
Yes.
whenever you're ready.
William Martino, I ask the committee to oppose House Bill 119. House Bill 119 will force students to swallow your ideology that conflicts with many parents' values across the state of Maryland. A good educational system holds a line across ideologies and focuses on academics. The academics in my county, Harford County, have suffered devastating consequences with this trend of watered-down curriculums. Some courses have even been completely eliminated. Reading proficiencies in the past 20 years for elementary students have dropped anywhere from 20% to 50%, depending on what district you are looking at. The educational system, or should I say non-educational system, has become more focused on pushing activism and endorsing the beliefs of special interest groups than teaching traditional academics. Every time the state mandates new lessons for the pupils in the school system, standard academics are sacrificed at the altar of the General Assembly. This is becoming a crisis. The school system has limited time, funding, labor, and educational resources to prepare students for the future job market. Removing more resources from academics continues to erode their future. This bill would strengthen centralized power and weaken local power. Why do you want to remove the voice of parents and local school boards? This bill would also weaken parents' abilities to be involved in the educational system. It will also weaken the local school boards. We pay our superintendents hundreds of thousands of dollars to be nothing more than a figurehead. I encourage the Assembly to eliminate House Bill 119 and oppose state overreach. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for any members of this panel? I will start with Delegate Patterson. Well, I'm sorry. I will start with the Vice Chair and Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much to this panel for coming out and testifying and sharing your views with us. We really do appreciate it. I have a question for the women all the way to my right here. And your statement around anal and oral sex was certainly one that I think was heard fully in the room. And I just wanted to understand, because I'm looking at the bill, where in the bill or what makes you believe that anal and oral sex are suddenly going to be taught in the curriculum as a result of this update?
It's in the comprehensive health framework.
It's not in this legislation, though. We're talking about this bill, HB 119, which will provide an update. But where in this bill is there some language that would specifically include that update to the framework?
The language is in the comprehensive health education framework.
Okay, but not in HB 119. This is a question for the full panel, whoever would like to respond. I wanted to get your comment in terms of the opt-out provision. I know that there are several parents who are here who oppose this legislation. I would like to get your comment on the opt-out provision, since no student would be required or mandated to learn or participate in this. So if you can please comment on that.
I want to comment to help your first question.
Where am I? No,
Could you-
actually,
Oh,
I appreciate
apologize.
that, but if
Okay.
if someone could answer my second question.
Okay. The opt-out, you said to the people to the left, so I thought you were asking me and her that first question, so my apologies. Ask your second question again?
The opt-out provisions, since students would not be required or mandated to learn this curriculum and that parents can opt them out, I just wanted to get your comment on that, please.
Yeah. From personal experience, we're very hesitant on this opt-out. A lot of times the communication to opt out isn't very clear. I think I stand for a lot of parents that are shocked with what they're seeing in this framework. They're slowly seeing these things that are bringing up red flags. They're getting scared. They don't like it. It might not be in the bill yet. We do appreciate the opt-out. That is very much better than nothing. But even though the bill is not stating exactly that these type of things are going to be taught, it is stating that you're going to require all of this framework to be taught or suggest it in a very strong way to be taught at each level. So we're seeing this framework, we're seeing at different levels. At kindergarten, they start gender ideology. At 4th grade, and I'm sorry, I didn't bring my notes, I wasn't ready for it. They're going to start talking about something different because of the puberty. So it's going on and on for these individuals, and we have to keep ourselves educated at each level, and we want to make sure we're communicated at each level. We can opt out, and from experience, we don't really get communicated to, or they're not even aware of this. So we're just concerned that that opt-out wouldn't be communicated so clearly. That's my opinion.
So perhaps local board issues around communication with the opt-out. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your responses.
Delegate Patterson, then Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to hear comments regarding this bill. I have a question for Mr. Willems, and let me qualify by saying I'm a former member for 12 years of MABE, and I appreciate the fact that MABE consistently is in opposition to anything that's mandated. However, in your testimony, there seems to be a lot of rationale that rests upon the MSTE 2021 revisions, but that goes back to regulations that were adopted 3 years prior. So in terms of mandates and looking realistically at what is needed now, I have a concern regarding the testimony of the persons you cited, yet they're in contradiction to the testimony that we've heard, certainly from Med Chi as well as from the state superintendent. So my comment has really question rests upon looking at the legislation and looking at what's currently available. Is there room for any kind of modification, amendments, et cetera, that will address the concerns of parents that I've heard sort of in my district, as well as a number of comments that I've received in my email?
Delegate Patterson, I appreciate the question, and I think to provide a sense of what will happen if and when this legislation is enacted, it would essentially restart the process that was completed in 2021 to develop a statewide framework with the components, the key components that are outlined in the legislation. They're all in the framework that was adopted in 2021. The same professional parties would be brought to the table, very much the same outcome. One thing that this bill does is, I think, limit the community engagement to local amendments, local implementation provisions through the curriculum that are consistent with the state framework. And there is certainly debate about what's going on at the local level in Maryland as to how consistent those local curricula are with the state framework. That would, I think, continue to, or in a couple years when this work is completed, continue to be a subject of dispute and litigation and complaints to the state board and whatnot. So certainly codifying in the statute, the annotated code is a step above COMAR in the Code of Maryland Regulations. They both have the full force and effect of law. And so where we are currently, and again, Mabe's testimony is in the context of we already have law in Maryland in the form of COMAR regs that do pretty much precisely what this bill intends to do.
But not at the same level. Thank you very much.
Delegate Ebersol.
Chair, so it's nice to see Mr. Willems. Glad to see you in your normal role, and I have a couple of questions for you. This framework, and I'm looking at it here on my computer. The MSD requires it, it's in regs. Are all counties following it?
All counties have undertaken the process of reviewing the framework and having adopted local curriculum aligned with the state curriculum. At least one board has, I think, made a more pronounced effort to distinguish at least one option within its curriculum from being closely aligned or consistent with the state framework.
And do you feel like the framework is pretty substantive and actually appropriate? Does MABE have an opinion on that?
MABE does not have an opinion on all of the specifics in terms of the educational and health expertise that goes into recommending what is included at each grade level. I will say that based on my 21 years of experience here, much of it is very closely aligned with, for instance, debates we've had here in Annapolis around legislation on consent, where the legislation is initially proposed. It raises a lot of concerns and fireworks, if you will, and it takes a year or two for folks to understand what it is we're talking about in explaining consent and boundaries, physical boundary issues to very young children in their best interest from a public health and education standpoint. So much that is in the framework does reflect work like that we've been engaged in for a number of years.
One more, if I may, Madam Chair. So then does it, given that there's substantial parts of this that it sounds like that you feel like are worthy for a curriculum framework, are you concerned that there would be forces that would change this framework in a way that would make it perhaps not as effective or substantial if we only leave it in code and don't actually put it in on COMAR and don't put it into code?
I believe the legislation is fairly broad, and it would provide, therefore, broad discretion to the group that is gathered by MSDE and the Maryland Department of Health to weigh those factors. This being Maryland and our respect for the professional voices of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Bloomberg School of Health, et cetera, I would presume a very similar, if not nearly identical outcome in the framework, given that 2021 was very recent. Really what has changed is that in 2019, when the regs were proposed, there was just very little public attention at that time. And so there would be more scrutiny, certainly, as this issue has gained a lot of public awareness.
Delegate Fair, your light went off. You're good? Okay. Delegate Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with respect to some of your questions, so in the state effect on our fiscal summary, it does say that MSDE does advise that the comprehensive health education framework that was completed in 2020 meets the requirements of the bill. So I think that's why parents are concerned, because they are saying that it does meet the requirements and could be put into verbatim as far as the bill. So my questions are, Maryland does have a long history of local control, and that's what a lot of parents would like to keep as far as local control. That is where they touch their school curriculum the easiest. That's where they find the transparency issues. That's where they're able to be engaged. With this codifying, that does take some of that out of their hands to put it into law. So since a lot of this curriculum has already been developed, Mr. Williams, do we usually legislate who develops the curriculum at the local level? So when we're talking about, quoting from the proposed bill, in developing a curriculum under the paragraph, each county board shall establish a committee composed of educators, health experts, and members of the local community to review and comment on whether the curriculum materials are consistent with the comprehensive health education framework. And that says in developing curriculum, so while curriculum is being developed. Is that a normal part of the process, or is it usually more guided by the local board?
Delegate, it's an excellent question, and I think this is a little more specific to ensure that there is that broad community engagement in the development of the health and human sexuality curriculum. Than more specific or clearer language than you would ever see in the context of the development of the math curriculum or the English language arts curriculum. I think you're correct there.
Yeah, so my concern about that would be is if a lot of the curriculum has already been developed, and we have to go back and do that, which again, I'm all for openness and transparency and parent engagement. So I would want to know whether this would be a recommending committee, whether it would be a voting committee, whether this would be, and these are important things for a local Board of Ed, because if it's a recommending committee, it just provides recommendations to the Board of Ed. If they actually vote on these changes, then that's a little bit different. The new Family Life Advisory Committee in Comar has very specific, where they took a lot of that control away from the local board and let them, the board was able to vote where the Family Life Committee recommendations no longer come to the
Delegate,
board.
do you have a question?
Yeah, so the question is it a recommending committee or a voting committee? And which, is it going to be, would this be subject to open meetings? How would that work?
So,
And I apologize, some of my questions would be more for the state superintendent. That's when I had my light on before, so.
yeah, I wouldn't want to specifically answer the Open Meetings Act or Public Information Act kind of related questions at this point. Would be happy to follow up. But I would say, from the glass half full perspective, I mean, this is the key work of school boards, is to focus on student achievement and to engage the community in the work of the school system and Board of Education. And that the community engagement process envisioned in this bill is certainly aligned with the key work of school boards.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I kind of caught my light at the end of the first panel as well. So the question, so we did something in 19 to 21. So I'm a little bit confused based on some of the original testimony. So are we scrapping that altogether and starting over, or are we just enhancing what was done in 19 and 21?
Delegate, with all due respect, I'm not sure. I believe that if the bill passes, it will at least trigger the revisiting of the process that was undertaken in 2021. I wouldn't presume that a whole lot of work would have to be done to essentially re-recommend the standards and framework that were adopted in 2021. They are very inclusive of the gender identity and human sexuality issues that have been raised by the public and raised here today. And again, they reflect all of the legislation that has been enacted that I'm aware of in the area of health and human sexuality education in the state. And I presume the professional judgment of our health and educational professionals have not shifted dramatically from 2021 to 2023. So I would imagine it would be an expedited process of renewing, with some refresh, but renewing the framework released in June of 2021.
And you had started mentioning two of the organizations that were involved in that original process. What organizations were involved?
Delegate, the list is pages long of contributors and reviewers. A lot of, I think 19 of the 24 local school systems had representatives in some capacity on the group, and certainly the departments of health and education with curricular specialists, health specialists, and in my written testimony, University of Maryland School of Medicine, Advocates for Youth, parents, students, and so, and this process, and we've worked on student health legislation in areas from diabetes to sickle cell to anaphylactic allergies and seizure disorders. It's a very robust process when our Department of Education and Department of Health get together and bring professionals together to develop standards and frameworks. And so it's a lot of very smart people in the room. I just hit the highlights. I'm happy to provide a copy of the framework.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Woolen, very nice to see you again. So I think you talk about the implementation side, and some schools may follow closely about the regulation we passed or bill we passed. Some other schools may not. what's the best way to really to examine how do they really follow the COMA and other standard or other laws we passed?
Delegate Wu, that's an excellent question, and I think that our preferred avenue of dispute resolution would not be to pass a bill when there is a dispute arising between a local school system and the state with regarding the implementation of the curriculum under the framework. There is another process. There is the authority of the State Department of Education to review and to provide comments on the local curriculum and to certainly hear appeals arising from that local curriculum. And, you know, and then the lawyer in me can't help but saying things can ultimately end up in circuit court or the Court of Special Appeals. And we've certainly seen education issues rise to those levels in the past. But there is a dispute resolution process, an oversight and review process already recognized in law and regulation.
I see. In terms of other, you said there may be not so many changes in some aspect of the bill we passed in 2019 and 21. But I see in terms of the mental health, right, after COVID, we definitely see a surge of need or changes in terms of our student health, mental health. How do you see, if we want to update a certain aspect for this bill, what's the best way we can move forward?
Delegate, I would say that MABE and the testimony I've offered over the years and very recently last session, we try to emphasize that it's not on the merits in terms of why we're opposing legislating curriculum. So in talking to an advocate right before this hearing, issues of sexting and human trafficking and domestic violence and other issues can be the subjects of standalone bills as additional curricular mandates. We do oppose those bills as we oppose virtually all curriculum-related bills. But yes, would those issues be appropriate for an expert review committee to consider adding to the framework? Absolutely.
Delegate Buckle, then Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I had a question or a comment to think about for the parent groups who testify. I have a 6-year-old little boy who goes to public school, light of my life, and I teach him, try his mother, I'm sure as well, to be kind. You know, this is a very sensitive issue. I would never want my little boy to discriminate or be cruel to anyone on the basis of any of these issues. That's not who we want our kids to be. But something one of you said in response to Delegate Wilkins' question, I think rung a bell for me. It's very hard as a parent to keep up with everything that's going on. It sounds funny to say I have a full-time job and then I do this as well. And if you ask me right now at 2:45 in the afternoon what my son is learning at Parkside Elementary School in LaVale, Maryland, I don't know. I wish I did, but I'll be honest, I don't know. And so would you feel more comfortable, this is about the distinction between opting out and opting in, would it make parents feel more comfortable perhaps if this type of curricular questions required an affirmative opt-in? Hey, I want my kid to get that type of education. I think it's appropriate for he or she, as opposed to if I don't affirmatively select that, maybe I was okay with it, maybe I wasn't, but I just didn't know enough. I didn't feel comfortable, so I don't want my child exposed to some of this at these early ages. Would that make parents perhaps feel more included in the process or more safe, I guess, about what was going on with these particular sensitive curricula? Sure, yes, I would be fine with that if Madam Chair's all right. I mean, I don't need everyone to say the same thing, but certainly if one or two of you have some thoughts, that would be helpful.
I'm Tara Thompson. The issue with the opt-out right now mainly is it requires parents to be given due notice of when they opt out. And as you said, lots of parents are busy. They don't see the email. They don't see the paper in their child's backpack. And they simply don't know. And then their child is in the classroom. So yes, an opt-in is definitely a better approach. But the main problem here is what is within the framework. And we have standards that are being taught in grade 7 on page 34 of the framework that identify solo, vaginal, anal, and oral sex along with positive outcomes of each. And I don't know about you, but to me, that's not something I want my 12-year-old knowing about if they're not exposed to all of this. we're taking away parental rights by not allowing us to have a say in what our children are taught and how they're taught. And moral upbringing is our job. It is our job to teach our children to be kind and loving when they go to school. It is not your job to teach our children about anal sex. Thank you.
Delegate Feldmark, then Delegate Vogel. Delegate Feldmark, then Delegate Vogel, then Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, I believe, for Ms. Scott. I think I heard you say that gender ideology has no place in our public schools. And I'm just hoping you could clarify for me exactly what you mean by gender ideology.
So the gender ideology framework is in pre-K and kindergarten, teaching about different kinds of families and things like that, and teaching about pronouns and things like that. Like in kindergarten and pre-K, they don't know what grammar is. They don't know what a pronoun is. It's just not appropriate for the age level. They should be learning. Our children in our Maryland public schools are way behind in reading, in math, in science. Their scores bear it out. They're falling further and further behind. And K through 12, pre-K through third grade should be focused on getting them learning how to read, how to do basic, basic academics. And that's falling by the wayside because all this political ideology is becoming, it's trumping academics.
So if I understand the part of your answer that I think was answering my question is, when you refer to gender ideology, you mean pronouns and family structure, and you think kindergartners don't use pronouns or understand family structure? Is that right?
No, they do, but they're learning family structure based on how their parents are instructing them. This is not something that the schools really should be getting involved in at such an early age because, like I said, our children are not able to read, and if we keep adding more and more of this identity politics and all these politically correct ideologies into the education, there's only so many hours in the day, and these kids are not getting the academic formation that they need because now it's very popular to be teaching about gender ideology and other things like that.
So let me ask you this. If you don't believe gender ideology has a place in our schools, do you believe that transgender students, gender fluid students, gender nonconforming, non-binary students, or children of parents who may be transgender, gender nonconforming, gender fluid, or non-binary, do you believe those students have a place in our schools?
Well, of course, and of course they are in our schools, but it's between the parent and the child to work out these issues. It's really not appropriate to be, instructing pre-K and kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade on these issues. They're still forming their identity, and right.
So you believe these students have a place in our schools, but they don't have a place in our curriculum. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that we need to focus on academics and stop putting all this gender ideology, political correct, woke ideology into our schools. That's what I'm saying. So yes, parents can teach their children how to be kind. Parents can parent their children no matter what gender ideology they identify with. It's the parents' role, not the school's role to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a quick follow-up. I have 3 children who are 11, it's 3, so let me think, 11, 9, and 8. And when my 11-year-old, 2 boys and a girl, my youngest is a girl, was in preschool, and my question is to you, Ms. Scott, would it surprise you that without any conversation from me about gender identity or sexuality, he came and told me that there was a student who had 2 dads, did not faze him at all. So he wasn't taught that. He observed that and had friends who had that. And then my daughter, who is now 8, learned the same thing from just her interactions in preschool. And at that age, they did know nouns and pronouns and how to read. So would it surprise you that there are students who do learn these different types of families by just their everyday interactions with being in school without being taught by the teacher? So by the time they reach elementary school, they're already quite aware of gender identity, and they might not have a full understanding, but they know that these different types of families exist. Would that surprise you?
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And yeah, I mean, so it's going to come up in schools, but I'm just saying the curriculum doesn't need to be centered around this. It should be centered around academics. It should be centered around reading and phonics, things, writing, getting them the skills they need so that because if they're not reading at a 3rd grade level, which many of our students aren't at 3rd grade, there's no more instruction in reading. It's K to 3, you're learning how to read, and then 3rd grade and on, you're reading to learn. And our kids this is a big problem. Our kids are not proficient, and they're being moved along, and then they get to college, and they have to take remedial math and reading because they didn't get it at school, because we keep adding all kinds of things to the curriculum that has nothing to do with academics.
Thank you. Delegate Vogel?
Joining us today. My 2 questions are open-ended, so I would ask the panel to keep your responses brief. Let me just preface this by saying that I am an openly gay legislator, so I take this issue very personally. And I'm reflecting back on my time in school, right, and trying to remember the experiences that I had in sexual education and health classes. And my question for the panel, my first question, based on the existing policies, regulation, and law, at what point in middle school or high school should I have had the opportunity to learn sex ed that was inclusive of my sexuality?
I think what is happening here is a misunderstanding. I'm trying to keep my comments because at the end of the day, we are not the experts here. We're parents. We didn't have the time to 100% educate ourselves. I feel the questioning is sort of in an attempt to make fools of us, but some of them. Quite honestly, I'm not here just representing Mom for Liberties. I'm representing myself as a parent. You're 100% right. At some point, kids need to learn about gay. I had a gay best friend. I love him. Okay? They need to learn about it. But our thought process here is kind of like there's already been curriculums in place. Yes, maybe at 12, a kid knows he's gay and he needs to feel he can learn about how he expresses that. That's fine. We feel the appropriate time to teach that stuff. I can't speak for everyone. I would say the appropriate time to teach that stuff could be in high school, sure. Do I see that it can sometimes confuse some other kids? Absolutely. It happens. Some kids are sheltered, some kids aren't, all right? But parents as a group feel like there's too much focus. When I see gender, that has nothing to do with being gay. That has to do with a child doesn't know if I'm a girl or boy. That's the way I see it. That's the confusing part. I'm not speaking on behalf of Moms for Liberty for that. I'm speaking on the fact that that is so confusing. I'm dyslexic. I can't even get they, thee, he, she correct. If you see my writing, it's confusing, and it's not that we don't care about every one of these kids. We can teach simple kindness, simple unity, simple, we love you for who you are. A kindergartner comes in and says, hey, my dad and dad want to adopt a baby. The teacher can go, that is great. We love all kinds of people here. We don't need to give these intense lessons on it. Because not only because we don't care about these people and we don't accept all these people, it's because we want our kids to get an education first. I testified at the state board. They cut half of my testimony out. I will provide that afterwards. I cannot stay on time. I'm a bad speaker. I'm a bad writer. I will provide my testimony to that. These kids are having they're having gender phobia. They are seeking therapists. I couldn't afford my kid a private tutor. I had to afford therapists, and that had nothing to do with gender, okay, or being gay or lesbian, okay. But this situation is just going so far that schools don't have resources to handle it and take care of it. They don't have the money. There are fights because now this one group thinks they're superior than the other. We just need to keep simple lessons, simple curriculum. Treat everyone with kindness. You don't agree? Just simple. We don't have to go so in depth. It's just, that's my personal opinion.
Before I go to my second question, Mr. Willems, any answer to that first question on currently under regulation, policy, and law, at what point in my high school upbringing or middle school should I have had inclusive sexual education?
Under the current framework, I believe you would find evidence of that inclusiveness beginning in kindergarten.
Got it. So I don't, I went to school a few years ago, but I don't recall ever having inclusive sexual education or having been taught positive representations of LGBTQ people. And I'm not alone here, right? If you look at the data, only 1 in 5 students have reported ever receiving any sort of education with LGBTQ history or positive representations of LGBTQ people, and only 11% report ever having had inclusive sexual education. I was not one of those 11%. So my question to you, right, I got to sit through sexual education back in the day, watching my straight peers, right, get educated on healthy relationships, on healthy sexual relationships, right, from the perspective of a straight person and 4 straight students. I'm curious if the panel believes that gay, bisexual, transgender students should have that right to get educated on how to have those healthy sexual relationships just like their peers have the right to.
Thank you. I think this has gotten way out of hand, and it's gone into the LGBTQ topics. And really, what it's centered on is parental rights. And when you think about an ideology, it is a belief system that is handed down to a child that is not fundamental in their upbringing from their parents. So the way that I look at the framework with, 36 times gender is announced in the framework to my child, who may not believe that there's anything more than a male and a female when you're born, and may not believe that our sex is just assigned to us and something that we can make up when we're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is the problem. When the gender ideology is placed onto kids at the age of 4 in preschool, they grow up to be young girls in middle school who think that they can be whatever they want. And when they're going through menstruation and a really hard time in their lives, they are forming a group with their girlfriends, and there's a 4,400% rise in young women jumping onto this trans movement. It's a problem in America right now, and it happens nowhere else in the world rather than America. What this framework does is it sets them up for this time in their lives to jump on board with all these other young girls. And what some of these kids do, some of the most vulnerable kids who come from abuse or trauma, they end up going and mutilating their bodies because they think it's the right thing to do. And there has been many, many women who have spoken out about the ill effects of the decisions they made when they were young. We have to protect all children. All children. And while this framework has a lot of stuff in it that's great and needed, parents should not have to pick and choose what they opt their children out of because they don't want it given to their child. It should be up to parents to be able to educate our children on some of these sensitive topics, such as sex and all that. And if they want to include anal sex, that's great. I don't send my kids to school to learn about sex from their teacher at all. And I hope that everyone on this committee feels the same.
Delegate, thank you. Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Williams, I wanted to start my question with you. At what age do we start teaching sex in school currently? Or what grade?
There are requirements that certain content be covered by, in fourth and fifth grade and no later by the end than by the end of fifth grade.
Gotcha.
And so that's the set of content that I would refer to as human sexuality education. The other issue that I referred to in response to Delegate Vogel refers to family structure, gender identity, and those issues are referenced as appropriate content, subjects as early as kindergarten.
So education on sex begins in elementary school already, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. I was curious about learning and education. I know that we have a lot of questions around when we're confused about things or when we're undereducated about issues, when and where do we learn about those issues? I would open this question to the panel. Where do you feel people best learn about the general public?
I'm a little confused by the question.
Yeah, sure.
If you could explain
so
more.
Where do you feel like we best learn about history?
Oh, history.
Or about public health, about diseases, about science? Where do you think we best learn these topics?
I would say it's a combination.
Okay, a
Home and
combination?
school, yeah,
Sure,
home and school.
sure. So when we talk about the public, we talk about all people. There is a youth behavioral risk survey that is conducted biannually by the Maryland Department of Health, and the Maryland Department of Education is involved as well. And students are interviewed and asked to self-identify whether or not they are lesbian, gay, or bisexual. They do not currently collect data, it's important to note, on transgender people due to significant pushback from the public, so that we don't have the actual data to be able to speak about how many trans people are impacted in Maryland public schools by decisions that are made by governing bodies like boards of education, as well as this body here at the Maryland General Assembly. Would it surprise any of you to find out that 18% of all high school students in Maryland public schools identify as LGB, just LGB, not even trans? And that statewide records show that an additional national studies show that students are coming out as trans at a rate of about 4%. So combining those together, we know that LGBTQ plus students make up more than 1 in 5 students in the entire school system in the state of Maryland. Would that information surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me, but my question back to you is, this 4% data in the trans community...
We don't, the questions just go one way.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
To the panel, that doesn't surprise me. The reason it doesn't surprise me is I feel there's been a huge movement to make those numbers increase. Not that I'm not okay with the LGBT or trans. I think, unfortunately, that number is going up because of, I don't like to bring up COVID, but COVID happened, school shutdown happened, a lot of things happened during that period as well, from my experience. I'm not speaking as an expert here. I'm speaking of what I went through in life. So what parents, there's huge uproars now, I get it. And people are surprised, where did this uproar come from, right? It's because as parents, we were busy too, just like everybody else was, and we weren't seeing what we're finding in the schools. Proof of inappropriate videos being shown. We were the teachers. We got access to seeing things that teachers were putting out there. It's all over within our groups now, and we're scared. We're like, it's not that we're not accepting, it's that no wonder the numbers are going up.
So
I'm not surprised.
if I may, set aside the trans number, which was a national statistic.
Yeah.
The LGB locally, the self-identified LGBT people, that report was released in 2018, prior to the pandemic. So this is long before any pandemic issues that you're raising here have come up. students have been on a consistent rise for being self-identifying as LGBTQ. I would be curious. I did have one final question, though, for Mr. Williams. Does the current regulations from the 2019-2020 regulations and the framework, the MSDE framework, require that boards of education provide community input? Receive community input? It does? And does it require there to be a committee that includes community members that can provide that input?
I believe so. I will certainly check, but the framework does explicitly reference the role of community input, and it is the framework that is intended to guide the local curriculum development. But in terms of the specific language in the bill relative to specific language in COMAR, I would have to check.
Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for your testimony. I have been hung up on this concept that there's a loss of power in the school board. I'm looking at the text, and I see section 4, 1, 2, and 3, each start with each county board shall. So I'm seeing 3 ways that the county board is empowered by this. So can you, in fact, section 5 as well also gives the county boards some additional power in my view. So can you explain a little bit more what you mean by this loss of power in the school board with this legislation?
Delegate, I believe the specific instance of where this legislation may be more restrictive than the current process under regulations and the MSDE and Maryland Department of Health process is in the role of community engagement to essentially ensure that the community is engaged in local curriculum that is aligned with the state curriculum, and as opposed to community engagement around where variations or exceptions may be found. And I'm sure that there's a reason for that specificity in the legislation relative to some of the variations and exceptions that have been created at the local level. So it's not that the legislation itself includes a number of specific ways in which the local board authority is limited. The ultimate outcome, I think, is intended to provide less opportunity for that community engagement to be reflected in local variations on the major content areas included in the state framework.
Okay, and just a follow-up question to that. Community engagement can also include possibly going to hearings at the Board of Education to county level. Could include voting for the person on your school board. Okay, and my one final question is, so I'm a parent as well. I have a 6-year-old who started kindergarten public schools for the first year. To be frank, I hear what you're saying in terms of their concerns about learning gender identity, things like that. But however, does this legislation preclude parents from having conversations at home about these issues? Okay, I want to make sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, are there any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you very much. I know you were up there for a long time. Thank you very much. Next folks to come forward, please. Laura Bogley, Barbara Pivick, Dana Schultz, Jacqueline Gregory, and Catherine Sullivan. And while they're coming up, I should mention, particularly to individuals that are going to be testifying virtually, we do all the in-person testimony first, and then we will pivot to folks that are going to be testifying virtually. So if Ms. Bogley could begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Laura Bogley, Executive Director of Maryland Right to Life. We respectfully urge your unfavorable report on this bill that far exceeds the state's limited authority to act in place of the parents during the school day, particularly on the matter of student health. And there were a lot of questions here that I think really were distractions from this bill and got off topic. The purpose of education, the curriculum in the school system, is for health and human reproduction, not human sexuality. And that is the line that has been crossed, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the conflict with parents. Parents send their daughters to school to get an education not to get abortions. So abortion is not healthcare, I need to remind you, and it's never medically necessary. So yes, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recommends that sexuality education be medically accurate, evidence-based, and age-appropriate. They also recommend that sex ed include the benefits of delaying sexual intercourse and preventing unintended pregnancies. But Maryland law does not require sex education curriculum to be medically accurate nor age-appropriate. And I know even though there's that language in the bill, we do not trust Planned Parenthood to determine what is appropriate. The state of Maryland is derelict in its duty to provide a safe learning environment for school children. Instead, the state has undermined parental rights and given abortion-invested activists unfettered access to school children using taxpayer dollars to promote radical K-12 sexual indoctrination and abortion activism in our schools. Both Planned Parenthood and Advocates for Youth have reported revenues received from providing training in Maryland public schools. Advocates for Youth promotes gender fluidity, radical sexuality, puberty blockers, and global access to abortion for minor children, including the exclusion of all parental rights and their minor children's reproductive health care decisions. Advocates for Youth develop standards for Maryland school-based health centers that are primarily located in poor and underserved communities. Maryland SBHCs already operate outside parental consent by distributing and implanting birth control, subjecting minor children to—
Could you wrap up, please?
Yes, minor children to abortion counseling and referral, and in some cases providing or coordinating transportation to abortion clinics during the school day without parental knowledge or consent. Maryland Right to Life trusts parents to make the best decisions about their children's health. Once again, we urge you to put parents and children before politics and profit by issuing an unfavorable report on this bill, and I welcome questions.
Thank you. And I called you the wrong name. It's Ms. Bogley. Thank you. Ms. Pivek, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Barb Pivek, and I'm here representing the Maryland Federation of Republican Women. We're 1,500 strong. We have a unit chapter in every county in the state of Maryland, and we are part of the National Federation of Republican Women. I'm a mother, a wife, a grandmother, and I opted my kids out of sex ed many years ago when it started. I had that right. The MFRW has submitted written testimony, and we respectfully ask that each committee member read it thoroughly. We speak in opposition to House Bill 119. After a thorough evaluation of the bill, the Comprehensive Health Education Framework, we believe that although many hours and taxpayer funds have gone into the development of this bill and framework, and that the intentions may be good-hearted, the bill will have negative impacts on families and communities across the state of Maryland. In fact, we believe that the state has and will, through this legislation, continue to increase increase the state's values rather than the legal guardians' rights and responsibilities to teach and train their charges. The framework presents so-called positive process outcomes for topics 1 through 8, but presents no specific information. There's no curriculum to have any kind of thought process for this bill. To how the information is presented and taught. Where are the facts? Or is this a doorway to the subjective opinion of the state and its departments and agencies, rather than the individual family units' cultural and faith-based beliefs? We believe that the opt-out options are restrictive and don't do enough to clearly notify legal guardians, and that the requirement to instruct the same information is just disingenuous. We stand in opposition of House Bill 119 and its cross-bill bill. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Dana Schultz, please.
Hello, I'm Dana Schultz. I'm an Air Force veteran. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've worked with children and family in the Center for Prevention of Domestic Violence, and I've worked with incarcerated juveniles and those entering society. And I've also classically home educated my 3 children for over 20 years. I understand the importance of family as the basis of a flourishing society. Curriculum and teaching must focus on basic education to ensure each child is performing at grade level in reading and mathematics. Leave sexual discussions of anal, oral, and vaginal sex to parents and doctors. Maryland is failing families and children. The 2022 NAEP showed that only 31% of Maryland fourth graders scored at or above proficient in reading and math. That means 70% scored below. Children have limited bandwidth of learning. Only 25% of eighth graders scored at proficient in mathematics and 31% in reading. Inclusion of this new and trendy gender ideology beginning from kindergarten in public school curriculum is linked to negative mental health and physiological health outcomes for parents. For students, parents have the fundamental right to insist that content of public school curriculum is factually sound, and inclusion of new content is based on new research and methodology which presents evidence-based facts and demonstrably leads to positive outcomes. The curriculum cannot be the most recent, trendiest ideology or methodology without concrete positive outcomes. The so-called age-appropriate inclusion of gender ideology from kindergarten is not supported by Marylanders into curriculum, ensuring that it will be throughout the entire social structure of system. Believing the choice to opt out is very naive. The school library will have books upon the shelves freely to be read throughout the day. Students will be taught sexual and gender ideology and freely share it with their classmates. Many times their curriculum is woven into many studies, such as history and writing, and requires the students to memorize, write, and support gender confusion.
Could you wrap up, please?
Leave the discussions of sexual learning at home and with the doctors and focus on reading and math. Children have a limited bandwidth to learn.
Thank you. Ms. Jacqueline Gregory?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Jackie Gregory, and I reside in Elkton, Maryland. I am here today as a mom of 3 and as a person who spent over 20 years as an educator. I am requesting that the committee take an unfavorable position on HB 119. This bill presents several issues for local boards of education, as well as the students we serve and their parents. HB 119 presents an unfunded mandate on our local school system. With the increased demands and funding required for the blueprint, this legislation will shift funds that could have been used to meet those expectations to this mandate, which requires county boards to rewrite their health curriculum. Our current health curriculum is rigorous, comprehensive, and appropriate, so this legislation is unnecessary. Local school boards should have the autonomy in determining to keep or revise their current health curriculum. The Maryland Health Framework adopted in 2022 presents challenges for parents. As a mom and former teacher, I know that all kids develop at different rates. Conversations that some kids are developmentally ready for, other kids are not. Parents are the best judges regarding how and when those conversations should take place. This bill preempts the parents' right and ability to make those important decisions regarding their children. The 2022 framework includes sexual content for children at young ages, which many children are not developmentally prepared for, or to be quite honest, are inappropriate discussions to have at school. One example is various ways to have sex or specific sexual acts such as anal, oral, or solo sex being discussed in 7th grade when children are 12. If an adult were to have that discussion with my 12-year-old, that would be a major issue with me, and many parents across the state agree. Placing those discussions inside the 4 walls of a classroom does not change the inappropriateness of that conversation, and in fact makes the inappropriate discussion worse. Please respect the autonomy of our local school boards and the rights of the parents we serve and pass an unfavorable recommendation to this bill. I'd also like to comment that Cecil County government has written an unfavorable report or unfavorable letter. You should have. Our county executive had to leave, but she wanted to be here to also support that position of favorable for HB 119.
Thank you, and I wish I had known if the county executive wanted to testify, I would have certainly brought her up here. I was not aware of that, and she wasn't signed up, so. Ms. Catherine Sullivan. Hit your button. There.
My name is Catherine Sullivan. I'm from Baltimore County. I'm here to testify in opposition to HB 119. The 2021-2022 assessment results were abysmal. 45% ELA results, 45% proficient third and fourth graders, 40% proficient fifth graders, 53% proficient 10th graders. Math got much worse. 76% of sixth graders are at a proficient math level. 6.5% of eighth graders proficiency, and 4.5% of high schoolers tested proficient in algebra. We need to focus on reading, writing, and math. This bill is not needed, and again, we must prioritize reading, writing, and math. HB 119, as described by the folks who support, sounds absolutely glorious. Problem is, I have 4 children and over 21 years of parenting, and attitudinal shifts, which have led to HB 119, have emboldened teachers to go way beyond the scope of the prescribed curriculum. I have a friend who was in a health class, her daughter was in a health class, and the teacher pulled her aside and told her that waiting until she got married to have sex was a very bad idea. That's the kind of thing we're talking about when we say it goes way beyond the scope. The problem is that when we create these things, they never end where they began. And to deny that is to deny reality. It is our experience daily that teachers have been emboldened by these kinds of programs. We have a comprehensive health program right now. It was well thought out by people, professional people. We do not need another one to take over what we already have. This HB 119 is not needed. Please, please, please consider taking beyond what we have seen today. I know there's been a lot of gaslighting going on, making it seem like we are really bad people, but we just want reading, writing, and arithmetic to be what our children learn in school. Thank you.
Any questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you. I just have one more. Thank you. You all are free to leave. We have one more individual signed up in person, and then we'll switch to virtual. Is Michael Rosenberg here? Whenever you're ready, just make sure you hit the button, please.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Michael Rosenberg. I represent Moms for Liberty in Montgomery County chapter. I'm a resident and businessman in Montgomery County, and I have grandchildren who are entering the elementary school system. I'm going to kind of cut to the chase from listening to everybody else, and I want to emphasize one very important point I feel, and that is that Montgomery County is one county that the school board has already enacted a curriculum, an LGBTQ curriculum. I have a very close person I know who's a teacher in the 2nd grade, and this person's been given the materials and the guidelines. What is missing is that, in this discussion, is that it's one thing to respect LGBTQ students and anti-bullying and treating kindness, but this curriculum that I've already seen goes way beyond. It is, in fact, indoctrination, meaning that if someone, what is being taught in the teacher guidelines is taught as fact, that the students should accept this fact, regardless of whether they're faith-based believed or not. Example, in Montgomery County Teachers Curriculum Guidelines, it states, if a student says he can't be a boy if he was born a girl, the teacher is to respond, and I'm quoting directly here, our body parts do not decide our gender comes from our inside. We might feel different than what people tell us we are. We know ourselves best. When someone tells us what their gender is, we believe them because they are the experts on themselves. Now, I recently heard of a 3-year-old at a daycare who said, quote, I'm non-binary, just like my 5-year-old sister. I wonder where she heard that from. I ask you, do any of you know any 3-year-old who's an expert on themselves? But this is what the teacher guidelines are actually stating to tell the students. Preschool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We're going to move to our virtual individuals. Thank you for being patient. I'm going to call up a group of people who were signed up virtually to testify in favor of the legislation, if they're still with us. Wendy Novak, Jaden Ferris, and Sophie Aaron. And Sophie, whenever you're ready, you can begin.
Sure, thanks. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, great. Vice Chair Wilkins, my name is Sophie Aaron. I'm a social worker at the University of Maryland Safe Center for Survivors of Human Trafficking. I'm here to testify on behalf of the Safe Center, as well as the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force Legislative Committee in support of HB 119. And as Ms. Shapiro said almost an hour, maybe an hour and a half ago, with 2 friendly amendments. At the Safe Center, we provide direct services for survivors of sex and labor trafficking. We also serve as the regional navigator in Montgomery and Prince George's County, where we work to identify child and youth victims of sex trafficking and ensure that those folks are connected to trauma-informed care. In this position, we've seen firsthand how many youth fall victim to human trafficking and the need for increased upstream intervention, including prevention work in schools, which health education certainly is, and in particular, an increased prevention work around not only the topic of healthy relationships, but healthy online relationships. Over the past 2 years, the Safe Center has provided more than workshops for more than 1,800 high school students, parents, teachers, and school administrators in 8 Prince George's County schools. Those have focused on healthy relationships and the signs of human trafficking. And through the partnership building with these schools and engaging with their communities, it has become increasingly evident that there is a major gap in knowledge on topics around healthy relationships and the risk and vulnerability factors that lead to exploitation. While the current framework includes many, many important topics, it does not include education on the safe and healthy use of technology and online communication to avoid violence and exploitation. For that reason, the Safe Center and the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force suggest friendly amendment language to be included to specify that these topics are included in the comprehensive health education framework. We also recommend that subject matter experts on the topics of human trafficking and child exploitation are included in each county committee to review the health curriculum so that we can make sure that the curriculum reflects the most recent research and best practices in the necessary areas of instruction. For these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report with friendly amendments on H Bill 119. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Aaron? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Aaron, I would just ask the amendments, you may have already done this, just submit them to us on behalf of your organization if you haven't already.
Thank you. They came from Ms. Shapiro from MNADV on behalf of the Task Force, the Safe Center, and
Yes.
MNADV. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ferris.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Jaden Ferris. I'm a high school senior from Anne Arundel County. Today I'm speaking on behalf of Annapolis Pride. As a queer student, I know firsthand how crucial it is to have a comprehensive, medically accurate, and unbiased health and sexual education curriculum that acknowledges and affirms students with a variety of sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions. All young people across the state of Maryland, and those like me, deserve comprehensive health and sexual education. The consequences of inadequate education can lead to unhealthy relationships, unintended pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, bullying, sexual assault, discrimination, just to name a few. Furthermore, the lack of a mandate requiring medically accurate and age-appropriate, comprehensive, and unbiased sexual health education puts Maryland students and the public health at undue risk. Queer students need and deserve the same access to accurate, up-to-date information about their sexual health as any other student. Research has shown that comprehensive health and sexual education leads to healthier teenage outcomes and encourages responsible sexual behaviors. Despite the belief of many that children are too young to understand gender identity and sexuality, this assertion is scientifically false. From the moment children are born, they're receiving messages and stereotypes about how they are supposed to look and behave from peers, books, and the media. Studies show how the messages kids receive about gender influence them at very early ages and places them into strict boxes, preventing them from reaching their full potential. As found by the American Academy of Pediatrics, by age 4, most children have a stable sense of their gender identity. This is a core aspect of one's identity that comes from with each of us and is an inherent aspect of one's makeup. For these reasons, Annapolis Pride respectfully requests a favorable report in House Bill 119. Thank you.
You had impeccable timing. Any questions for Mr. Ferris? Okay, thank you very much. Did we have Wendy Novak? Yes. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Novak.
I'm a parent of a middle school student that experiences hate in schools to the point we were concerned about his safety. Teaching an inclusive and comprehensive family life will help to make schools safer for all students. The data from the risk survey is clear. Our LGBT students are in danger in our schools. Teaching from an inclusive, age-appropriate health framework will help students to understand there is more than one type of family, multiple ways to express gender. Not everyone is the same. If it is appropriate to teach about one type of family or identity, it is okay to teach about others. Carroll County is using tax money to create a framework that excludes our students of color and our LGBTQ students and families. They remove discussion about racism and intersectionality, their impact on healthcare. They're refusing to allow it to be taught that it is important to treat people of all gender identities and expressions with dignity and respect. Not allowed to teach it is wrong to tease or bully others based on aspects of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. Some parents think certain subjects should be left only for the parents. Not all students have parents or caregivers that can or will teach these topics. Some topics need to be covered by multiple people to make sure it is understood. Kids don't always listen to their parents. The parent saying there is no gay or trans child is not going to teach respect at home. No parent should have the right to opt my child out of an inclusive, comprehensive education. We need your help to ensure all students are included. Students in Carroll County need the same framework as the students in Baltimore County. It is unfortunate hate and bigotry disguised as values is preventing individual counties from including all students. When given a choice between mandating a framework that includes all and not, the choice is clear. Everyone should be included. I beg for a favorable report on House 119. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Novak? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, virtually, we have some unfavorables. Melissa Goshorn, Carrie Gillespie, Vince McAvoy. Ms. Goshorn, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of this committee. My name is Melissa Masusi Goshorn, and I'm a parent to 3 children in Calvert County Public Schools. I'm here today to testify in opposition of HB 119 and asking you to do the same. A lot of the people in support of this bill talk about human trafficking, sexually transmitted disease, and healthy relationships. There seems to be an opportunity for the state to offer parent training and education to keep their kids safe through parental education so the schools can focus on academics. As elected officials, you know how important it is that you speak on behalf of your constituents, understanding that the need of your district may be very different than the needs of another. HB 119 takes away the local school system's ability to properly educate their specific student population. What the children in Baltimore City need are very different than those issues the children in Calvert County are experiencing. Health education is supposed to be developed using information from each district's health department, the local school system's climate surveys, and the observations within the school building. All of this very helpful data would be useless if HB 119 passes, because all students in every district would have the same health education, watering down the needs of the individual students. Another concern with HB 119 is written is that it will allow the state to change the framework at their discretion. If a system purchases health curriculum, develops curriculum, or takes a hybrid approach, the change in framework will increase the financial burden to the individual districts every time. Ask yourself how you can approve this bill when it gives the freedom of change to the framework at any time with the simple stroke of a brush. I've heard several professionals in Maryland schools that are worried about the time commitment teaching this framework will require. Currently, very little, if any, school districts are able to teach every item in the framework in the allotted health time frames or class credits. They have to pick and choose the most important subjects and ensure they can teach the most important pieces at the depth appropriate to their unique student body. How is this bill ensuring Maryland students can compete on the world stage academically? Maryland had one of the largest academic downfalls in COVID due to the decisions of the Maryland State Department of Education. And at a time when Maryland children are barely showing proficiency in reading and math assessments, adding more time to discuss health topics seems reckless and out of touch with the needs of
Ms.
Maryland's
Goshorn,
children.
can you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes. Please oppose Bill HB 119 as it takes away local control, increases financial burden on local districts, removes the necessary focus on reading, writing, and math, and ultimately hurts our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gillespie, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. I am Carrie Gillespie. I'm an Anne Arundel County resident and a mother of 4 children. I am testifying today in opposition of HB 119. What struck me most before I read my written testimony about the panel that we heard today is that there was not one expert who was called today to speak up for this legislation that would explain to me why and how this bill is going to help my children who are students within the school system better prepare them for college, the workforce, or for life. At a time when Maryland children are suffering academically and over the prolonged school closures that were forced upon them by this state legislature and the unelected appointed members of MSDE, and at a time when parental rights in educating our children are being recognized in states throughout our great nation, HB 119 comes across as both unnecessary and tone deaf. I respectfully disagree with the chairwoman and Superintendent Chaudhry that this curriculum does not take away parental rights and is age appropriate. The health education would introduce gender ideology to all 4- and 5-year-olds in pre-K and kindergarten. For those who haven't read the health education framework, that's on page 28. According to the CDC, age-appropriate developmental goals for kindergartners should be simple, like counting to 10, hopping on 1 foot, naming some letters in their name, and using simple rhymes like cat and bat. I have a very bright 4-year-old daughter at home who will be a kindergartner next year, and gender ideology is not a concept she can grasp, nor one that I choose to introduce her to anytime soon. And as her mother, it is my right to decide when it is an appropriate time to do so, based on my personal, religious, and spiritual beliefs and her readiness. Nobody knows our children better than we do as parents. Why does the state legislature feel they know better than parents and educators in determining what is age appropriate for the curriculum our children will be taught? The spring 2023 MCAP tests demonstrate how much our children have fallen behind academically. Only 17% of 6th graders and an abysmal 6.5% of 8th graders are in the state are proficient in math, a subject which requires mastering the basics before advancing.
Can you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes, ma'am. On
Thank
page
you.
34 in the health education framework, we now want to include extraneous subjects such as oral, anal sex, and self-pleasure be taught to these struggling middle schoolers. I would encourage this panel to read all 70 pages. To conclude, this state legislature and MSDE are attempting to overstep their bounds and force all students to be taught ideology instead of facts. Please vote no on HB 119. Instead, craft legislation
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gillespie.
Can I just finish this last sentence?
We have, no, time's up. Thank
Becoming
you.
the greatest in the nation.
Thank
by
you.
concentrating-
Now we're going to have Mr. McAvoy testify. If you could bring Mr. McAvoy up. Okay, thank you. He's not here. I have Alexandria McCone, Heather Fletcher, and last Jennifer Fold. So either one of those. Ms. Fold, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jennifer Fold, and I am the mother of 3 elementary-age daughters in Anne Arundel County. The description of this bill that was given in the beginning of this hearing is not accurate. HB 119 does take away control of the local school districts. It forces the implementation of this controversial framework, which in its current state is a guide. Local boards of education were elected by the citizens in each district to represent them. Stripping power from local elected boards is antithetical to our republic system of government. Additionally, this framework presents very controversial topics of which there is no consensus. In this framework, kindergartners will be taught gender ideology, including the belief that there are more than two genders and a person can choose their own gender. This framework continues its controversial topics as it discusses sexual orientation with fourth graders, and in seventh grade, our 12-year-olds will be taught about anal sex and solo sex. These are not appropriate topics for schools to teach. These are topics that should be discussed by parents or caregivers at their discretion. Forcing these topics on children, stripping power from local schools, and taking away the fundamental rights of parents to the care, custody, and control of their children is a slap in the face to the American system of government and parental rights. Maryland schools and the MSDE are failing our children. The 2022 MCAP scores reveal Maryland children are deficient in almost every category. There are real problems facing our schools and our children, yet here we are talking about this bill instead of how to help our children improve in academics. Governor Moore's campaign slogan was "Leave no one behind." I find this ironic, as Maryland children have long been left behind, and this bill perpetuates that condition. The focus of the MSDE and the legislature should be to serve the best interests of our children, provide them with safe schools, and focus on academics where they can learn and thrive. Our children deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Fold? Okay, seeing none, is Ms. Heather Fletcher. Okay, Ms. Fletcher, whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, I want to speak on some things that have been brought up in the questions and so forth regarding this bill, House Bill 119, requiring each county board of education to create an age-appropriate curriculum that is consistent with the comprehensive health education framework. The health education framework, like was talked about earlier, is not skill-based, it's comprehensive-based, which means that instead of just learning a female has this part and a male has that part, the students need to demonstrate that they understand this information. So in kindergarten goes from recognize a range of ways people identify and express their gender, and it goes from recognize to then identify, to demonstrate, then to explain through the years. So starting in kindergarten, it's recognize. In first grade, it's identify. In second and third grade, these students will have to demonstrate ways to treat people of all gender identities with expression and dignity and respect, and identify range of ways people identify and express their gender. So you ask a kindergartner or a first grader who believes in Santa Claus to identify a range of ways people identify and express their gender. It seems extremely manipulative. My name's Heather Fletcher, and I'm speaking on behalf of Our Voices for Freedom. And because there's so much a part of this, I just want to make sure you guys understand that you are taking away local school board rights. You're mandating that we teach gender ideology starting in kindergarten. Currently, COMAR 13A.04.18 doesn't require that this ideology be taught before 5th grade. So that is a huge change by approving this. And I just want to say that there's not been a lot of research shown that this is safe for children. All of you say that you're very understanding of people and the way they believe, but yet you were never taught this in kindergarten, okay? So
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. Can you
ended up being a wonderful
Ms. Fletcher,
person
can you
that-
wrap up, please?
I will wrap it up. But yet, we need to now teach this to our kindergartners. I want you to prove, the onus is on you to prove that this is safe for children. Do no
Thank
harm
you.
first.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher. Are there any questions for Ms. Fletcher? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 119. Next, calling Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Thank you for your patience. House Bill 99, and you can bring up whoever you would like to come up with you. Mr. Enton? Madam Speaker Pro Tem, whenever you're ready.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Atterbury and Vice Chairwoman Wilkins. It is such a delight to be with you in Ways and Means on today, and to all of my esteemed colleagues. Today I have before you House Bill 99, which is entitled Education, Public High Schools, Financial Literacy Curriculum. This curriculum and sort of this bill, I should say, may sound somewhat familiar to you because this very committee passed this bill last year, a similar bill last year, and as we did the same unanimously on the House floor. However, this bill, House Bill 99, is slightly different. It does not require an education graduation requirement. Keeping the same theme of hearing this consistently, this bill has been introduced since 2012, except for 2017. So that just goes to show you how long this fight has been underway to have financial literacy a part of our public school system consistently. Now, what you will hear today is certainly probably some opposition from the State Board of Education and some others as well. But I just want to say, just starting off, I hear you. I hear you, State Board. But I also hear you when you come to your local counties and the state legislature for increases in budget so we can meet the needs of our young people. While I'm a very big supporter of our public education, I also want you to know that please hear me as a mother. Please hear me as a current student, as a former adjunct professor, and hear me as an elected official for the past 16 years or more. To say that our community is saying financial literacy is a priority. They're saying it's a priority because we look at the numbers of the poverty rate. It's so fitting on today to have our governor speak about poverty and what we're experiencing as a state, and the fundamentals of making sure that poverty and many other issues are addressed are through financial literacy. We must make it a priority. Some statistics that you have heard over the years, and just recently I was looking at a Forbes article that spoke about the percentage of American adults, which equates to about 63 million, that are either unbanked, which means that those households without a checking or savings account, or those that are underbanked, which are households that have a bank account that lack the traditional financial services, such as being able to get credit or to get a loan. What I want to surmise is the mere fact that we have persons who have not had exposure to checking accounts, savings accounts, and where a better place to have it than in your public school system. You have to meet the children and meet our youth where they are. Many families don't look the same. They don't have families or parents or guardians that teach at the same level or even been exposed to this type of information. And we need to do our due diligence to equip our young people with this information at the onset. In addition to my advocacy for this piece of legislation, we also have the advocacy and the support from our state treasurer. We also have the support from our state comptroller. Those are our two top financial persons in the state of Maryland that is saying, please educate our young people, have a consistent curriculum so we in fact can have a stronger community and a stronger state. In Maryland, we have 10 counties that are already having a standalone curriculum. And with that being said, that's a start. That's a start for us to move the needle to ensure that all 24 jurisdictions have that in place. Again, I hear the state board to say you don't want to mandate a curriculum, but I cannot and will not continue to see that our young people leave the school system not having adequate information of how to balance a checkbook, how to use a debit card. Nowadays, everybody has Cash App, and even has a stock option on there. But let's educate our people, educate our young people. The last point I will make is that everyone doesn't go to college. We heard that today. Everyone may choose a different path, and that's okay. But we at least should give them a good start in our public school system with consistent information on financial literacy. Our current state superintendent hails from Texas. they have a curriculum in place, and 21 other states in the nation does as well. So in closing, if you would look in your testimony that is in favor of this, is that we have a student from Washington College that was very articulate in saying that he wished he had this in his education while he was matriculating through the school system. And he noticed that this is a problem. And so to that end, I just want to reiterate that this is not a graduation requirement, but it is a requirement to be in the school system, taught and be consistently taught to our young people. So today, I'm asking for a favorable vote on House Bill 99, and I look to any questions that you may have. And I have a panel here today. Some of those persons had to leave, but certainly know there is a lot of support for this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Record, Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association. We strongly support this legislation. This legislation passed out of the House, as you heard, unanimously last year. And you say, well, why do the bankers care so much? We care because we know better than anyone, I think, how critical it is that young people understand what, banking, understand credit, understand what's going to happen to them if they overdraw their accounts, what's going to happen to them if they don't pay their credit card bill. I mean, it's critical that young people understand this. Not everybody goes to college, but, my son went to college. My son got a credit card. My son got a student loan, and it was an issue going forward. We just think it should be mandated. And I understand fully that the State Board and the of Education, and Mr. Willems, I know, is here, and I've got Mr. Willems' testimony from last year, so I have some idea what he's going to say. And what he's going to say is that it isn't necessary. What he's going to say, I think, is that the current regulations from the State Board require that at the various stages throughout a student's life, elementary school, junior high school, senior, that they get this, educated on this. But it's not a stand-alone course. It's added to a social sciences course. It's added to that course. And I have to tell you that's what it's not a standalone course, and what this bill requires is a standalone course. This bill passed on the House floor last year unanimously last year. And that's because it's necessary. We really do need to have this. I think that having a mandate, it doesn't require how many hours it's taught. It doesn't require what the curriculum, must be. But it does say that in high school, you have to teach this. It's critical. The worst thing in the world is to graduate, go get a job, and not pay your bills, not pay your credit card. You have to go to a check casher to get a check cash instead of a bank. It doesn't make any sense. So we would ask you in the strongest possible terms to pass this legislation. Today was Bankers Day in Annapolis. We had about 100 bankers over at the Calvert House this morning. I'll wrap up. Many of them were here today, but unfortunately they had to leave. But the industry strongly supports this and hopes you'll give it a favorable report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enton. Next person may go.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Edward Lee. I'm a full-time licensed realtor, qualified by the Maryland Association of Realtors as a Credit Smart certified counselor. I specialize in working with first-time home buyers. In today's mortgage industry, there's a new form of redlining that was declared illegal in 1968. Today, redlining is called credit worthiness. Credit scoring has marginalized Black and brown communities. To a large degree, the Maryland Department of Education is at fault. The department has failed to require that financial literacy be taught in the formative years of a child's education. As you are aware, COMAR only requires financial literacy to be taught in grades K to 7. In grades 8 to 12, financial literacy becomes an elective. House Bill 99 corrects this injustice by requiring financial literacy to be required to be taught and credited in grades 8 to 12. 80% of my clients range in ages 35 to 45 years of age. They come to me unable to purchase a home because of poor credit standing. These are mostly Black and brown clients with no knowledge of how the banking and lending system functions. They do not understand how to properly use credit cards, nor do they understand the credit bureau scoring system and their functions, or strategically how to differentiate between needs and wants. The basic financial literacy skills should...
Thank you, sir. If you could please wrap up.
These are persons that I'm asking your support for House Bill 99.
Thank you, and perfect ending there. Sir, can you actually state your name for the record, please?
Edward Lee.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, next person, please go.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, esteemed delegates, fellow Marylanders, my name is Dorian Rogers, pronouns he, him, his, and I serve as the president of the Maryland State Conference Youth and College Division of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, known as NAACP. On behalf of our intersectional youth around Maryland, I come before you to vote or to support House Bill 99 and ensuring that the requirements are listed as above and to ensure that our students are prepared as they exit through life. Not only does this bill emphasize the importance of laying the foundation for the next generation of our informed and engaged youth, but it consistently works to ensure our students within K through 12 schools are provided tools and resources as they are prepped for life after graduating K through 12 schools. As a representative democracy, we tend to get caught up in the rhetoric that our youth are our future. However, I am here to reaffirm that our youth are our now. That said, as our now, we must recognize that our now is currently required to take financial literacy material until they reach the 7th grade. Once completed, this course becomes an elective, as originally mentioned. As a graduate of MCPS Public Schools, specifically Clarksburg High School, it is no secret that many students must dig to find financial literacy electives labeled under different course names. Reflecting on my time in MCPS Public Schools, a financial literacy course would have been fundamental in tying in the components that we learn in each of our core classes, again, as a standalone course. This is fundamental in processes such as taxes, personal finances, student debt, and so many more items that intersect within our diverse communities around the state of Maryland and abroad. It is crucial in the ongoing fight to combat the racial wealth gap and ensuring that our diverse yet intersectional communities have an equitable opportunity to access and be included in the importance of financial literacy. As an educator as well, many of my students question why our tax system allows loopholes despite the importance of contributing to our society, again, as engaged and dutiful citizens, not just in Maryland, but within the United States. So with that being said, I call for the support of this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Bratsakis, and I'm President and CEO of the Maryland and DC Credit Union Association, and we represent over 70 not-for-profit financial cooperatives, credit unions in the state of Maryland and 1.9 million Marylanders. And I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 99. Our credit unions are always focused on the financial well-being of their member owners and the communities they serve. It's embedded in our structure and our mission. The panel has done a fantastic job explaining why it's so important to graduate with this information and with this skill set. However, I would like to highlight some of the information that's included in our written testimony. Credit unions have an important role in helping members and their communities, but the data points a clear picture of the need for financial education for young people. A 2022 poll by the National Endowment for Financial Education found that 88% of the respondents said their state should require a semester or a year-long education course. 80% said they wish that they had a required course when they were in school. and 75% said that spending and budgeting is the most important financial education topic to be taught. Today, whether you graduate and enter the workforce or whether or not you're going to further your education, Maryland residents have significant debt load. We tied first with Georgia in average student loan debt of over $42,000, fourth in average credit card debt of $9,000, 10th in average mortgage debt in $283,000, and 24th in average auto loan debt in $19,000. Credit unions are very highly engaged. They participate in financial literacy fairs, which is a program that gives students budgetary and career planning, Millionaires Clubs, which is our voluntary high school clubs for entrepreneurial projects, financial counseling certification. Over 150 credit union executive staff are trained and certified as financial counselors and focus on credit and credit score. For those reasons, we encourage you to please pass with favorable review.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the entire panel. Questions for the panel? Let's start with Delegate Patterson.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Delegate Sample Hughes, for reintroducing this bill to us. We've heard it multiple years. And I also had the opportunity to look at what Maryland is doing in terms of the state Department of Education. Right now, we have a financial literacy curriculum that is somewhat vague in the sense that it has, in my estimation, not a lot of direction. Primarily, it is led by an Education Advisory Council, which offers information on identifying resources, alignment with curriculum, etc. So is it the intent of this bill, and let me start by saying this morning I had a chance to meet with 5 local bankers who are in support of this legislation, but is it the intent of this legislation to give some strength, some direction to what our youth need or students need as it relates to closing the generational wealth gap in terms of the poor debt that many students encounter? Is that the intent of this legislation? Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Patterson. You're actually, just spot on because the intent is to streamline the information, making sure all students get the information so they can have that level and that strong foundation while leaving our public schools, as we certainly want the best for them. So yes, you are very accurate. And the one thing I will just add on is that there are partners in our state that have helped along the way and supplement education, such as Junior Achievement and many other ancillary organizations. But we, as a state, have to lay the foundation and then, add on these other organizations that are willing to help. So to that end, yes, you are accurate, and we need to move forward. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Grossman.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. As a delegate that represents a district that has 25.5% poverty, I think this is really important for our students to start learning. So my question is a little bit technical, but just kind of curiosity for me. I understand that it won't be a graduation requirement. And so my question was really, how will we measure the proficiency that the tools are kind of accurately being understood and are going to be able to be used when those students leave high school, right? We can show you a budget, we can teach you wants versus needs, but really making sure they're absorbing and able to operationalize that information beyond school.
Sure. Thank you, Delegate, for the question. So that's part of the reason why we need to streamline it. And that's why we don't need to be so fragmented as it has been in the past. This district has something, this district doesn't. We don't have a way to measure it. So that's why we want to be direct and require the State Board of Education to provide that guidance, provide that level of direction. That's what they're charged to do, and we need to know what those outcomes look like. Certainly, we know over time it's going to take literally time to see those outcomes, but what we do know is that the State Board of Education has the ability to do this. What you will see in the fiscal note is that a contractual person was to be hired to make sure that the curriculum that is being in place or being decided upon for this half a credit was provide that consistent information and also provide what those outcomes should be. So that streamlined information is going to come from the state board. That's why I want it to be direct and not leave it up to every jurisdiction. You're welcome.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. When you're out talking to a lot of people, this is one of the things that you hear from the community that they would like to see in their schools and they would like to see as a graduation requirement. I'm going to touch for a second on my experience with getting some college loans, student loans, things like that. Here was the kind of training you got: sign here, here, and here, and then you've got $100,000 worth of debt, which can be crushing to try to get out of. So my first question is, why remove the graduation requirement? I apologize, I wasn't here last year, so I didn't know. So is there a reason for the removal of it? And then I'm a little confused because someone did say it would be a required class, but at the high school level, unless it's a graduation requirement, how would it be a required class?
Thank you, Delegate, for the question. So yes, it was a graduation requirement last year, but unfortunately it didn't get through the Senate.
I see.
So I wanted to be realistic in where we are. This is a start.
Okay.
Be honest with you, if it was my decision personally and no one else in the General Assembly, I would make a graduation requirement, just as these other states have made it, such as Alabama and such as, I want to say Georgia, but forgive me if that one's incorrect, but I know Alabama in particular. But anyway, they've gone that distance. And we can do the same in the state of Maryland, but I want to be realistic on what I can and can get through the Senate. So this is a foundation to get us there, because many, many years, the previous comptroller, have been calling for that same question of wanting to have this implemented as a graduation requirement, just as we have service learning hours as a requirement. And it makes sense, but let this be the first step. And then I certainly would love to take it the next step forward.
But you don't have it's not a required course right now, so it would still be an elective.
This bill calls for it to be a standalone course.
Right, correct.
So
which
it
is
is
just embedded.
measured and streamlined, and it would be a half a credit, not a whole credit. Previous bills introduced did require a whole credit. School system indicated that it was going to be difficult to move things around, and I understand that. And so that to that end, we didn't want it to say, oh, it's just an elective, but this is something that's required. So at this juncture, it needs to continue to have the consistency in the conversation at the state level with the Board of Education, and then figure out how that looks or what that looks like long term.
It's actually very timely to develop that course because we do have the Health 2, which is a graduation requirement, and that is only a semester course. So school systems are going to be looking for other half-credit courses, and I would love to see this to be, an option for the students. The other thing is, have you, in other things with our career and tech and things like that, we have councils. Have you thought about a partnership council and prescribing a partnership council or advisory committee for the school systems to develop advisory committees? If you haven't, that's okay. That's just another idea. And then to our banking partners, I would really, if you're going that route with helping develop curriculum, because I do think sometimes our teachers don't have that, that real world understanding, and you guys are the ones that have that real world experience as far as what's missing in our graduates. So the other question I had is, are you familiar with Senate Bill 238?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so there was a lot of it that I liked in that, and that is making it a graduation requirement. So, and again, I'm new around here. So is there, and I know you already have a Senate cross-file, is there a way to merge those bills? Because some of the things that I liked is some of the things that they had instruction on as well.
I do want to make sure we stay on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know. We've been here a long time.
Sure
Anyway, how does that work? Then that's the last question. I apologize. Thank you.
Which question do you want me to take first?
If there is a good Senate bill, is there another Senate bill that's other than your crossfire?
Let me address this. Okay, so let's not reinvent the wheel totally. Okay, we have some, as I said, we have some jurisdictions that have a curriculum in place, and they are making inroads, if we will, to the goal. So again, it comes back to the State Board of Education to look at what is currently being done in our jurisdictions, such as Allegheny, Calvert, Caroline, Queen Anne, St. Mary's, those counties, and see what is most effective. In the Senate bill that you reference, it specifies a certain curriculum that is from a community college. And to that end, that might be effective. As I said in my testimony, I'm a former adjunct professor at Warwick Community College. I taught a curriculum that dealt with financial literacy, and it really opened my eyes to how many young people are not knowledgeable of a debit card, a savings account, any of those things. And so, but it is a requirement for the community college. So my point is that we don't have all of the answers. That's why I want to direct it to the State Board of Education, but with the mandate that they implement it. And our bankers, as well as other organizations that have the expertise and know what's on the horizon and knowing what is needed to be able to get a home, to get a loan, and to not get private loans that are going to cost you forever more than your mortgage, that's the information that they can bring to the table to help shape this curriculum. So again, we're not going to totally reinvent the wheel, but we are going to take best practices and we're going to move the needle forward. Sure.
Thank you so much. Next is Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Delegate, for bringing forward this bill. I think definitely we see there's a need in the school, right? So I remember my experience on the school board for the last 4 years. We talk about this a lot. And in Howard County, we actually had a course for this. I think then we always hear from our school board local jurisdictions that this may be unfounded mandate, right? So I just wonder, in terms to implement that, how do you envision this going forward?
In the fiscal note, it indicates that we would need to have a contractual individual at the state board to make sure the curriculum is intact. That's not costly at all. Mm-hmm. When we look at the cost of our young people leaving the school system and not being educated on these basic fundamental financial goals, that's going to put us more of a financial burden than it is to talk about what does this look like as an unfunded mandate. My understanding and what I do believe is necessary today is to be realistic. Our young people are not sitting in school with textbooks nowadays. It's hard to even get a textbook. So you can't add in the cost of a textbook, but what you can do is find some curriculum or materials that we'll decide upon that will be on your computer. These kids are using laptops now. Times have changed. Mm-hmm. So let's not speak so much about an unfunded mandate. Let's talk about what is necessary for these kids to graduate and to be knowledgeable on how to move forward. And some of the things are very basic understanding, and we have community partners to help us in that, to move the needle forward. Otherwise, we're going to educate and graduate young people who are illiterate and not prepared for the real world.
Thank you. I totally support the intent, right? So just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members? Seeing none, thank you so much, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, for bringing this bill. Before I call up our next panel, just a general statement for anyone that is testifying. We have 6 more bills to get through today, so we have quite a lot on the agenda. If you can please do your best to stick to your time. You have 2 minutes. We know it's really difficult to get in everything you want to say in 2 minutes, but once that timer buzzes, please wrap up your last thought. Thank you. I believe we have, I just want to make sure I didn't skip Raymond Luby. Oh, okay. All right, so our next favorable panel, I have 2 more people on the list, Drew Jabin and Martin Mitchell. And you may begin when you're ready.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having me. Drew Jabin on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association. Bob Enton covered everything for us, so I will just say that we are definitely strongly in support of this. And we had Bankers Day in Annapolis. We have our chair still with us here of the association for the year, and we would really appreciate a favorable report on House Bill 99. Thank you.
Thank you. Press it one time and then just wait. You're good to
Okay,
go.
yeah, I was a little impatient. I'm sorry about that. Greetings, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Councilmember Martin Mitchell.
I am the Political Action Chair for the NAACP, the Maryland State Conference. I would like to offer strong support for the passage of HB 99 because it will help children and young adults learn necessary financial skills and knowledge they need to become successful before entering the real world. It is imperative that we set our kids up for success to be financially sound stewards of the community. How to write a check, what is a money order, sometimes the hard lessons of what is credit, how to build credit, how to maintain credit, all things which I learned, well after graduating college. So, without further ado, I want to urge this deliberative body to pass HB 99 to ensure that every public schooler in Maryland graduates with a working knowledge of financial literacy.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your testimony. I believe we now have, let me ask if there's any questions. Any questions for this panel? All right, seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. We have an unfavorable panel of 1, Mr. Willems.
Welcome back. Dream ticket.
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, John Willems representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, here today in opposition to House Bill 99. I won't emphasize the curricular concerns because I think it's pretty well known that the curriculum has already been adopted in an embedded framework format to be integrated across the grade bands, and to really emphasize our major concerns with mandating the half-year additional course. The fiscal note indicates that 10 of the 24 school systems have already done that. That's a pretty serious lift in terms of space and staffing and budgeting to add a half-year course to the high school program. By way of example, it took the state board, I would say, at least 3 years to agree to double the amount of health education, our favorite subject of the day, from a half year to a full year. And that was in response to all the good work we've done and you've done to add curricular mandates and topics for health education over the years. But it took quite a while for the state board to wrestle with how to get the local school systems to be able to implement that full year of health education, and whether to eliminate technology education and wrestle with the high school graduation kind of array of course requirements. So I know this bill passed unanimously last year, has been pointed out. It might help on this side to consider amendments about phasing in implementation. There's nothing in the bill that reflects that, and would just urge the committee to look in that direction as you presumably move again to overwhelmingly support this bill, which again MABE does oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willems. First question is from Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Williams, so one of the things the bill says is that it has to be offered available to every high school student in the state. It's not like you can say there's not enough kids interested in it. It has to be available, right?
Yes, that's what the legislation says.
I was double checking. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Just a quick question. So you referenced the health and it being year-long. Actually, is it my understanding, is it your understanding that most school systems are doing it actually half semester in the freshman, sophomore year, and then the other half of it in the junior year? There's Health 1 and Health 2. The recommended time for the junior year is Health 1. Therefore, another half credit would actually be needed right now. Is that?
In the context of financial literacy, yes, another half year-long course would be required in at least 14 of the 24 systems.
Yeah, but the health class is recommended as a year. You said a year-long health class is what you said.
That's what we currently have.
Right, but it's being broken up into 9th grade and 11th grade.
And how this would be implemented, I mean, under the bill, it would strictly have to be a semester-long, half-year-long course made available to all students in the high school. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We do have 2 people virtually. Vince McAvoy, if you're on. All right, we don't see Mr. McAvoy. Monica Brooks. You can start
Good
when you're ready.
afternoon. Good afternoon.
You can go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Monica Brooks, and I'm president of Wycomico County NAACP, and I'm asking for a favorable report on House Bill 99. While the bill will benefit all students, I want to share a couple of pieces of information about Black families in particular. According to the Federal Reserve, the average white family's wealth is 8 times higher than the wealth of an average Black family. And the systemic inequality that is deeply entrenched in America's labor, housing, education, healthcare, and justice systems consistently inhibit people of color. The results create roadblocks to wealth with devastating outcomes for years to come. In Wycomico County, Maryland, 60% of our children are living on or below the poverty line. What are the chances that those parents would have the capacity to teach their children financial literacy? On the other hand, there are families who just do not have these conversations about money at all. High school students and young adults lacking financial knowledge are at risk of making poor decisions that can have costly and lasting effects. As a business owner, I have seen these results in many of my young hires. Many have no idea how to balance budget or to save money. And after being asked for loans and early payments enough times, I took it upon myself to try to educate them outside the workplace. Many nonprofits like NAACP and others are hosting programs and town halls to help mitigate this crisis, but we can only do so much. We don't have to wait. We can have an impact before graduation. COMAR requires that financial literacy be taught K through 12 in public schools. However, since they don't have to take it past 7th grade and it's considered an elective, the elective option disproportionately affects students of color due to reasons like social conditions, cultural backgrounds, and family knowledge relating to family matters, financial matters. So passage of House Bill 99 will require financial literacy to be taught K through 12. And so we ask for these reasons that you give a favorable vote for House Bill 99. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brooks. Any questions for Ms. Brooks? All right, seeing none, this ends the hearing on House Bill 99. Now, our committee and myself and the chair must apologize. We do need to reopen House Bill 119. There was one person that was missed, so our apologies, and thank you so much for your patience. Ms. Alexandria McCone, who is virtual, thank you for your patience on the line. We apologize again. House Bill 119.
Can everybody hear me? Awesome. I am Alexandria McCone, and I am here to urge you to dismiss House Bill 119, as it is an affront to both local jurisdictional autonomy as well as parental rights. I'd like to share a recent experience I had at a preschool learning event where 2 children had been playing with my daughter. The girl turned to me and asked, "Can girls marry girls?" I didn't have a chance to answer. Instead, the 5-year-old boy chimed in, "Girls can't marry girls. A boy and a girl have to marry to have a baby. The girl pushes the baby out of her vagina and boys can't do that." To which the girl replied, "My mom says girls can marry girls. I'm going to marry a girl." I stood frozen, shocked how these subjects included in the framework could cause such strife between toddlers. Their biggest concern should be the alphabet and counting, but instead they're debating their sexuality and family values at ages 4 and 5. Is everyone aware of the placebo effect? A person takes a medication and they experience the effects of what they think they would if they had taken the medication. When teachers, whom the children respect and listen to, teach what is introduced in the framework, they experience doubt in their own beliefs. If this bill passes, a divide in family beliefs will only continue to widen. Surely, lessons on respecting differences or simply sticking to essential subjects would be more beneficial than attempting to force approval of these controversial concepts, as human nature ensures that there will never be wholehearted approval of any one set of ideas. This bill seeks to force approval by driving a wedge in families. At present, parents are already fleeing public education in droves as a result of the controversial material being taught rather than academics. As the national report card shows, we as a state are disproportionately failing academically and need to get back to the essentials. Parents don't want this bill. The local Board of Education do not want this bill. We want academics, not sexualization of schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for your patience. That again ends the hearing on House Bill 119. We will now move to House Bill 85 with our House Majority Whip, Delegate Jazz Lewis. I believe you have a panel. I see Cheryl Boast, Christy Lynch, Donna Edwards, and Rick Pitts.
Even though she is not here, it is my honor to say Madam Chair and Vice Chair. I'm so excited for the new role. It's great to be here before the committee. Again, I'm going to try to keep my comments as brief as possible because I know you all have heard a lot today. So I am here in support of House Bill 85, which is a reintroduction from last year to no longer prohibit the maximum number of students assigned to a class to being discussed during collective bargaining negotiations and allow it to be an optional thing that is brought up in negotiations, not a mandated subject like salary and other benefits, but an optional thing because currently they're not allowed to bring it up. Through the pandemic, educators have taken on a tremendous burden trying to continue to provide for our children with a quality education, which I will add is enshrined in our state constitution. Often they do this with fewer resources and more students in their classes. Teachers report widespread burnout throughout our state and country while having greater difficulty providing that education that they want students to receive. This has led to a rise in turnover and shortages of education professionals across our state and its school systems. As you all know very well because of the blueprint, through our great work, we've identified over 110,000 more students that qualify for free or reduced meals due to the connection with Medicaid. This has also let us know that we have a lot more students who are going to need a lot more help. The point of this bill is to make sure that a quality area as it relates to the conditions of where our educators work is just something that they can bring up. All right, this isn't really a bill about shrinking classroom sizes. This is a bill about the quality of the classroom and agency for workers in their workplace ultimately. MSEA, and sorry to steal a little bit of your thunder, Cheryl, but they did a survey, and 92% of educators say that they support allowing this to be a bargainable subject. Another 60+% said that this would encourage them to stay in education. Many of our educators, of course, would like smaller classroom sizes, but just as much as that, they would like paraeducators in the classroom with them to just help them manage the environment. That has nothing to do with salary. That has nothing to do with building more buildings. That has everything with allowing them to do their passion, which is educate our children, okay? And the last thing I will state is that anything that is negotiated must be mutually agreed upon between the LEAs and the representative, which can be AFT, can be MSEA, whoever it is. Okay, so even if we pass this bill to allow it to be an optional point, they can choose to not, if for whatever reason, if it's not mutually agreed upon, it won't be included. The last thing I'll mention, I hope you guys check out the fiscal note that shows that it should have a de minimis to nil impact on us because anything that's negotiated is contingent upon local revenues being able to support it. And if they can't, they have to go back to the bargaining table. I urge your vote in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Ms. Boast.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and I want to thank the members of the committee and thank Delegate Lewis for putting this together. I am Cheryl Boast. I'm a 4th and 5th grade teacher in Baltimore County, and I'm proudly serving as the president for the Maryland State Education Association, representing over 75,000 educators throughout Maryland. We stand in strong support of House Bill 85, a bill that would no longer make class size an illegal subject of collective bargaining, but rather a permissive subject. Currently, Maryland is only one of 9 states where it's illegal, including Alaska, Indiana, Kansas, Maine, Nebraska, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. As an illegal subject, educators cannot bring up class size when negotiating contracts with a local board of education, even though class sizes have been a top concern for educators and parents, especially as it impacts the individualized attention educators can provide to students. School systems and educators, we need specific solutions to specific problems. By making class size a permissible subject of bargaining, the union and the Board of Education would have to agree that this would be a subject they would negotiate on. Both sides would have to agree. Educators and boards of education could come up with solutions for specific issues going on in their schools. This could include additional paraeducators in excessively large classrooms and lower grades, where classroom management might be a challenge, and educators in school systems should have the flexibility to discuss these issues together. This was an issue even pre-pandemic, and it's been heightened post-pandemic. I want to be clear what this bill is not. This bill is not permitting caps on class size in classrooms. That is not what this bill does. Anything that we would do and discuss would have to be mutually agreed upon by the local school system, the bargaining agent, and approved by the funding agency at the local level. I just want to share that I've experienced firsthand as a 4th and 5th grade teacher the benefits to better address the needs of students and develop relationships when there are fewer students in my class or an extra set of hands. So I would ask you to support House Bill 85 and give educators a voice in finding solutions. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Christy Lynch, and I am currently a high school special education math teacher in Prince George's County. I want to thank the Vice Chair and the committee members for this opportunity to speak on House Bill 85 and share my testimony. With more than 21 years of experience as an educator, first let me say that I love what I do. I've taught elementary through high school grade levels, and each grade level brings its own rewards because there's nothing like when a student says, "I've got it." The challenge is providing each individual student the attention they require and deserve so that they will have those aha moments. The issue of class size is not new. Prior to the pandemic, class size, caseload, and staffing ratios were already strained. Many educators have long lamented our inability to have any input or influence on the size of our classes. My largest class size when I taught elementary was a 4th grade class of 38 students. But I have colleagues who have had between 40 and 45 students in a class. On the secondary level, your average roster in total may reach between 120 and 140 students, and if you are in an elective, it may be over 200, depending on the content area. Grading papers and providing effective feedback, which helps to improve student outcomes, becomes an insurmountable task. Large classes inhibit our ability to connect with our students and build relationships that foster a positive learning environment, especially for the struggling learner. Not only are we grading papers, but we're documenting students' progress, contacting parents, holding meetings, testing, managing behaviors, monitoring our students' social emotional health, sponsoring after-school activities, preparing reports, learning new software, and I did say testing, and somewhere in between teaching. We're hemorrhaging educators on every level. Those of us that remain offer support to the few educators that come into the profession. For this reason, I ask your support of House Bill 85.
Thank you so much. Any questions for this panel? Delegate Griffith.
And for the first time, I get to say thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thanks for the panel for being here. I really appreciate it. A couple questions. So, of the factors that go into class size, I think we all agree, 38 kids, 45 kids in a class is way outside an effective range. What factors are in the control of the Board of Education to limit class size?
Complete control to do They can decide that they're not going to put more students than X number in classes, that they're going to put extra paraeducators in, separate classes into two. The boards of education have complete control over that.
But I'm referring to like in terms of, being able to hire and find the people to hire, being able to afford to pay for the appropriate staff. I mean, some of the stuff is, the school systems are pretty limited in right now being able to find folks and having the resources to pay folks. So there's some other control, correct? As well as the population of the schools. There's some limiting factors there too. So there's some stuff that's kind of out of their control.
I personally believe it's all in their control. If we paid higher salaries, we listened to educators regarding class size and supports, and we improved the culture in the building, we want to stay.
But right now, I'm saying with, we're pouring record amounts of funding into the schools, still having some of these issues with trying to find people that want to be, and there's other factors in the schools right now that are also affecting, there's some behavioral issues in the schools and some other factors that are definitely impacting teacher retention from the teachers I've spoken to. One of my biggest concerns with this, and I'd love to if you could address this, is certainly if it's negotiated that you're going to limit, say, to 25 students in a classroom, right? If that's negotiated and agreed to by both sides, now the schools are pretty bound by that contract to maintain that, even if they lose staff, even if they lose funding, whatever the case may be. And now they're kind of stuck and committed to that. We're having lots of issues across the state, and we're having issues like this across, even in Harford County, where students are being pushed through without, I've had about 24 teachers in Harford County approach me that they've been encouraged to push students through, bump up their grade, give a student a B and a C so they can, I'm sorry. So my question is this: would this potentially, as an unintended consequence, encourage school systems to advance students who may not be ready to advance so they can try to meet these pre-negotiated class size levels, working against the best interest of the student?
I will say very simply to that specific question, no, it will not. And your earlier question that was within that on the funding piece, I'm just going to reiterate what I said in my testimony, which was if the counties, the LEAs, the local boards of education receive money from the counties, if they don't have the money, they would have to renegotiate anyway, right? Because it's contingent on funding. So on both of those points on, would it blow up the budget? No, because it's contingent on budget. And we're not in the business of the state of Maryland of pushing students through the education experience. These are people, the LEAs want to create a quality education, and the educators want to provide a quality education. That's one thing that they don't disagree on at all.
All right, thank you. Delegate Miller.
I did it again. Okay. Thank you. I've got it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Every time. So I just have a couple quick questions. Contracts are usually ratified and voted on when?
It varies in many districts, but it's usually before the counties present their budgets and adopt their budgets.
So that would be spring,
yeah.
June. Okay. And then if most teachers certified, these are certificated employees around the county or around the state, are we having 1-year contracts, 3-year contracts, 5-year contracts?
They're different in each jurisdiction. It depends on what they bargain with the school district. They're
On
duration agreements. I don't know the average.
Average, I would say 3 to 5 openers are usually on for 1 year. Like you can open usually on salary and benefits, and this is not going to be one of the openers from what you were saying.
It could be. If the parties agree or bring to the table that this would be an opener, it could.
They would both have to agree.
Correct.
Because my concern is if you are ratifying contracts in the spring, and we know you usually have a sudden influx over the summer, to the delegate's point, is that how that can be putting us out of balance with that contract regardless of funding, because you may have had the funding when your budget was approved and you ratified your contract, but now you have a huge influx that sets your X elementary school out of balance. So then you'd be out of balance with the contract. So that, and you would have to hire a lot more staff. So that could be problematic.
I've negotiated many contracts and I've never gone through that. They do projections, student enrollment projections. In fact, schools right now throughout the state have gotten their enrollment projections of what they expect the enrollment to be in the fall. That's what they base their budget on. And so districts will set the boards of education will set their budget in place. It goes to the county council, county commissioners to put their budget that they're projecting for the FY24 budget. And then once it's funded, that is an agreed upon budget. And if the agreement at the bargaining table is not funded, then it goes back to renegotiations like Delegate Lewis.
And I agree, but best laid plans, and I was on the Board of Ed for 8 years, and you get a lot of enrollments that happen over the summer that could change class sizes. The other thing is this going to be an area of binding arbitration then? So would this go as binding arbitration to the Labor Relation Board?
If both parties agree, yes.
Okay, so it would be
I
binding.
mean, when I say both parties agree, if both parties agree to, this is what they're agreeing to, but it's permissive. It's not a mandatory subject to bargaining.
Okay, and then does this cover paraeducators as certificated employees? Where is, because you mentioned some paraeducators and putting in the contract having more paraeducators in the classroom, where would that fall under?
So this is in the collective bargaining, so it's open to certificated, non-certificated, and administrative units to bargain.
But this says certificated employees on the legislation. Collective bargaining, certificated employees, class size. I mean, that's what it's titled.
Sorry, maybe I'm wrong. I apologize.
Would it be subject to Me Too language then if it's not specifically covered under this?
If it's specifically certificated, then it would be our certificated unit.
So
I
then
apologize.
So how would you bargain for paraeducators, more paraeducators?
I'm actually looking at the language on page 2, where it's removing where the public school employer may negotiate the school calendar, then it says the maximum number of students. I don't see anywhere here that it limits that. I see where you're talking about in the title, but I don't see in the language, but we can definitely follow up on that.
That would be great. And I just want to talk about a little bit about the fiscal note, and then I'm sorry, thank you, Madam Chair, and then I'll be done. So Frederick County Public Schools, that's where I'm from, every increase every decrease of class size will increase the budget by $8 million. That's just our budget. So these are significant numbers that we're talking about, and we are talking about having a significant education investment from our counties that we're asking them as far as the blueprint. And then also you're talking about under the local expenditures that it could affect capital expenditures by increasing the number of classroom required. Aren't we already doing that with the pre-Ks that we're requiring? We're also possibly increasing the capital budget. So I just want to make sure as we go through these that when we're looking at these fiscal notes that they have an additive impact. And a huge impact on our local budgets that don't, like our local council doesn't negotiate the contract.
So first, I just want to reiterate the point that anything that is bargained has to be mutually agreed upon. So there's, by doing this, has no automatic effect on any LEA's decisions as it relates particularly to school construction. I'll also add the fact that this body did a yeoman's work during the last term in the Build to Learn Act to make sure that we are increasing school construction already. So I just kind of want to pull that part out and reiterate that under that same fiscal note that you referenced, everything is contingent upon that local funding to begin with, right? So I understand there could be concerns of blowing up budgets, but if you don't have the budget, you can't blow it up, right? So thank you.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I want to thank you very much bring forward this bill. I see the good intention of the bill, but I have some concerns in terms of how everything will really go through, right? So I've been on the negotiation table with our unions and different bargaining units during the last 4 years. Basically, the main theme, we are short of money, right? So, or we're short of staff. And when you don't have money or you don't have staff, I have a huge concern in terms of how to put the class size in the negotiation side, because that will create more tension, and then it's very difficult to reach a consensus between these two sides.
The question, I just want to make sure we get to the question.
Yeah, so my question is, if we add these two, how do you think this will increase the relationship between the unions and the board?
So I will go at first, and then if Ms. Cheryl or Ms. Lynch wants to respond. I actually think it will empower our workers, who we want more of, to want to work in Maryland, because they will have a say. And there are most states aren't as prohibitive as we are. So I just think if the ultimate issue is that we don't have enough educators because of the national climate, And as the survey that I reiterate to you guys says that our educators want this ability and would help them in their workloads or feel comfortable working here. I think it's something we should listen to. I do understand as a former Board of Education, as we have a couple of them here, that you guys might have been through very tough negotiating. I'm a former labor organizer, so I'm kind of used to the other side of the table of speaking for the workers. And I will tell you that if ultimately we need to recruit these educators in order to educate our children, we just need to balance that, okay? That's essentially what this bill is asking. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, the conversation is what we're asking to have. A voice and a conversation. We can disagree and not come to agreement at the negotiations table, but right now we can't even have the conversation. And we're asking to have the conversation to at least problem solve, because ultimately it helps to keep educators and it improves the academic success of our students. And we just want to talk about it.
Any other question for this panel? All right, thank you, Mr. Majority Leader, for bringing this bill. We do have additional in-person individuals. I think I called before, but Donna Edwards, Rick Pitts, Nathan Farrell, Franca Mueller, and Bricia Lopez Castro. You can begin.
Good afternoon. To the House Ways and Means Committee, my name is Bricia Lopez Castro, and I'm a Baltimore City resident and a member of SOMOS, Students Organizing a Multicultural and Open Society. I support HB 0085. This bill will repeal the prohibition on public school employer negotiating the maximum number of students assigned to a class. Passing this bill is essential because it would help students to be able to engage freely and communicate better with both peers and teachers. As a student, I know it's easier to develop connections with others in smaller class sizes because you no longer have the pressure of what strangers are thinking of you. When students are in smaller groups, there's more opportunities for participation and less social anxiety, which can sometimes lead to limiting their learning because it's scarier to participate when classes are larger. It's also easier to approach teachers and students who you know and have a connection/relationship with. It's a lot easier to ask questions and address concerns when in smaller groups. In my own classroom, I often don't feel comfortable enough to ask questions because I don't feel like I know my teachers well enough and don't view them as approachable. I also feel like I don't get the attention necessary, and lots of times my teachers don't even know how to pronounce my name by the end of the year, showing just how hard it is for students to develop proper relationships with teachers if they aren't naturally outgoing. I respectfully urge this committee to issue a favorable report on HB 0085, Education Collective Bargaining Certified Employees in Class Size. Sincerely, Bricia Lopez Castro.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next witness can begin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Franca Mueller-Paz. I'm a Baltimore City resident and a teacher in Baltimore City schools and support this bill. The passing of this bill is essential because our students deserve high-quality instruction with greater academic and emotional support from educators. I've been teaching for over 13 years, and this year, with classes of over 35 students times 6 individual classes, I can firmly say that large class sizes are tremendously detrimental to the academic and emotional well-being of students and pushing many of our teachers out of the classroom. We are living through a nationwide crisis of school shootings and violence. Last month in Baltimore alone, we suffered multiple shootings and tragic deaths of our young people. And in these dark times, we ask ourselves, what can we do to protect our kids and make our schools safer? When I asked a group of students this, they said the answer is simple: build relationships. People who really know each other are much more likely to let each other in, be helped through their dark moments, and navigate away from harmful decisions, talk out issues instead of choosing physical harm. When we have class sizes that let us get to know our students and that let our students get to know one another, we can do so much to prevent violence. It's much harder to notice bruises and cuts that shouldn't be there, how a cheerful young man has become sullen and withdrawn. To ask, are you okay, and how are you, in classrooms packed wall to wall with students? Kids can easily hide signs of abuse and depression when they are just a face among a sea of their peers. It is critical for the academic success and safety of our children to have the tools to bargain to reduce class size, at least to discuss it at the bargaining table. We can continue as a state to spend millions of dollars on putting metal detectors in our baby schools, on expanding prisons beds, or on repairing the social cost of our suffering. Or we can make meaningful decisions early in our kids' and teens' lives that can be a bomb against a violent future. In honor of Black History Month and Maryland's own Frederick Douglass, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men.
Please wrap
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you so much. Next witness.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Nathan Farrell, and I'm a Baltimore City public school teacher and District 44A resident. I'm here to give my full support of House Bill 85. I've taught for 17 years in Howard County Public Schools, and currently I'm in Baltimore City Public Schools. One summer, I had 67 students assigned to one of my Spanish summer school classes. Now, I know phys ed teachers and music teachers can beat me hands down on the how many kids have you had in your class before, but I just wanted to share that with you. This bill removes the illegality of discussions around class size between teacher unions and school districts. It does not make it a mandatory subject of bargaining, and it does not mandate class size caps or student-to-teacher ratios. You may be wondering, well, how does a prohibition on discussing class size impact common sense conversations about staffing, instruction, retention, mental health and behavioral concerns, and even components around blueprint implementation during negotiations? As a member of the BTU bargaining team, I have to emphasize that district bargaining teams shut down any conversation if it involves class size. Even common sense ideas that are mutually beneficial between the district and the educators is shut down because it's illegal to bring it up at the bargaining table. We are asking for the conversation to happen. This bill is a working conditions issue. It represents a working conditions issue, and it allows educators to bring the demands from the community to the bargaining table in order to address the issues our students and families face. After talking with folks from other states who can actually negotiate class size, they say that it can lead to common sense solutions like more support staff in a classroom or additional pay for teachers like special educators with huge caseloads who will leave and are leaving the profession because of working conditions. There are many positive outcomes that could come from being able to just discuss class size at the bargaining table that are not hard class size caps. Instead, we literally get shut down every time. We get shut down at the bargaining table. This bill will finally allow for common sense discussions around blueprint implementations, creative ways to handle pre-K expansion, retention strategies for job titles with high turnover, like special educators, and it'll help us address our mental health crisis in schools by discussing adequate staffing for related service providers and mental health support. For these reasons, I respectfully urge this committee to issue a favorable report, please, on House Bill 85.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the committee? All right, well, thank you to this panel, and a special thank you to our student who came out. Thank you so much for coming to testify and for your civic engagement. All right, we do have an unfavorable panel for this bill. John Woolhams, Mary Pat Fannin, and Sean Bolson. You may begin.
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, John Woolhams, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, here today to testify in opposition to House Bill 85. MABE has been on record in supporting adding class size as a permissive subject of bargaining for many years. Would point out that the major structure of our collective bargaining laws have been in place since 1968 when collective bargaining came to Maryland, but there have been some major reforms enacted over the years to particularly enhance the rights of non-certificated support staff at the bargaining table, starting back in 2002. Some other significant Fairness and Negotiation Act reforms about a decade later, and this issue has never been added to the array of bargaining rights and provisions in Maryland. And I think there's some strong reasons against doing so that have been salient in the past and are salient today. One is that it's outside the scope of our current agreements. And so if you look at a current collective bargaining agreement, it is all about salary, wages, benefits, leave, planning time. It's very detailed in terms of all of its different 25 or more components. And to add class size to that will add a couple things, particularly around the facilities issue and the qualifications of the staff. I know the panel of proponents before referenced the role of parents. I believe the intent would be to put highly qualified educators in front of groups of students in an appropriate manner, and that it would be an enormous challenge at the bargaining table to make any concession while you're discussing a permissive topic and conducting that discussion in good faith, to make a concession that would then be binding and could then become subject to dispute. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Sean Bolson. I'm superintendent of Harford County Public Schools, and I also serve as the president of the Public School Superintendents Association of Maryland, PSAM. So our budget is 84% personnel, and there's really three broad variables there. One is the number of people we employ, the next is how much we pay those people, and the third is how much money we have to work with. And so being kind of boxed in on both fronts will make balancing a budget much more difficult task. We recognize always that smaller classes are a good thing and something we always strive to achieve, but again, we have to weigh those other variables. When we consider smaller classes as a strategy, an intervention for improving student outcomes, it actually doesn't do well against other interventions. I mean, the educational return on investment for shrinking class size is not as great as it is when you consider other interventions like introducing additional supports, second people in the room, targeted supports around specific needs, academic needs for students. I believe this is partly the reason the blueprint for Maryland's future is silent on the topic of class size. The commission looked at successful school systems around the world and found, in some cases, very large classes, but they had a great deal of support in there. And so having the flexibility to target supports differently and not being bound by a specific class size cap is one of the reasons we are concerned about this topic. I would like to mention sort of one last thing, that also the idea of if we were to do something to specify class sizes in the state, doing it one district at a time across 24 districts, I think would ultimately lead to even greater inequities in what we're seeing in our classes across the state. So I do think that's a concern we need to attend to. So for this, I would consider an unfavorable report for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to Madam Vice Chair for holding it down while I had to testify on the bill. Thank you very much. And good to see you, Mary Pat Fannin, and whenever you're ready.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Pat Fannin. I'm the Executive Director of the Public School Superintendents Association, PSAM, and I'm really happy to be back. So I love this committee. And lots of new friends to meet, apparently. So if you've ever played whack-a-mole at Marty's Playland in Ocean City, that's the best visual I can give you right now for what 24 different LEAs are doing, putting their putting their blueprint implementation plans together. It's exciting, it's intellectually challenging, but there are a lot of balls to balance. And if we were to pass this bill right now, it would really take away, as Dr. Bolson said, a very important tool that boards and superintendents have. And that's deciding what resources need to go where in any given year, not an arbitrary number. Where is the need the most? So the backbone of education is teachers. The backbone of the blueprint is teachers. Increased salaries in the blueprint, increased professional development, and, sorry, what's the last one? Oh, more planning time. There's a requirement that teachers have to be in the classroom 60% of the time. So all of this equals more teachers already, which is great. This is going to be a world-class system. But we're in the middle of a national teacher shortage, and we already have a very difficult task ahead of us. So we appreciate the conversation. We have always valued our relationship with this committee in particular. So we really want to keep talking about this, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. We have 2 folks signed up to testify favorably virtually, Blanca Rosales and Diaz Casado. Delegate Hartman. This is you want to get the party started? What's going on? What's happening? I know it's been a long day. Okay. I can't say. Okay, Ms. Rosales, whenever you're ready.
Hello. Good afternoon, members of the House Ways and Means Committee. My name is Blanca Rosales, and I'm a Baltimore resident, a member of SOMOS, a students organizing a multicultural and open society, as well as the Writing Center tutor at Baltimore City College. I give my full support to HB 85 because this bill will repeal the provision on public school employer negotiating the maximum number of students assigned to a class. Passing this bill is extremely important to build a stronger community within our school, as well as to improve student safety. As a student, I've countered with lack of communication with my teachers due to the amount of students that they're in a classroom by not allowing students to have more individual interaction within teachers, which creates a non-communicative environment. Having less amount of students in a classroom will provide a better learning environment as they will build stronger communication with our teachers, which allows us as students to feel more comfortable asking the teacher questions without feeling judged by a greater group of students, as well as to build confidence within ourselves to participate more in class discussions. As a Writing Center tutor, I work with different students one-on-one as well in groups of no more than 5 students. And I can say that they've been willing to participate and interact more than they do in a class full of students. They work with less a great amount of help after a tutor session, and that they have stated that they feel more comfortable to work on assignments on their own, including students who are not completely fluent in English. This is why I believe this bill is so important. As a student, I want to be able to talk to my teacher freely about any issue that I might be having without having to remind them what my name is, even though I've been on their class for the past 2 years. It is also very important to remember that school safety has been jeopardized due to gun control issues, and it will be safer to have a classroom with less amount of kids, which will allow teachers to have more control over an emergent situation and make it less chaotic for students in the classroom, which is so important to start having this conversation. I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on HB 0085. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Rosales? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. We'll bring the next witness in. Okay, she is not here, so that concludes the hearing on House Bill 85. Okay, calling Delegate Chi, House Bill 143. Thank you for letting us rearrange our schedule and being patient, Delegate Chi. And if whoever you would like to bring up with you can come forward. And get started whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, members of the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for your hard work. I am Delegate Lily Chi, here to present HB 143. HB 143 expands the membership and the functions of the Career and Technical Education Committee, which is a unit within the Governor's Workforce Development Board as established by the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. This committee, Ways and Means, passed this bill last session, and the Senate cross-file made it all the way to the governor's house, but unfortunately it got vetoed. So this year's bill reflects the version that we have passed, both the House and the Senate. So the House bill last year did not cross over and made it all the way to the Senate, but we did pass the House and the Senate bill reached the desk. So this year's version reflects the version we passed. Essentially, the bill does two things. One is it adds skilled trade organizations and career colleges, two of the largest career workforce producers, to the list of the CTE committee advisors, which will bring this whole CTE membership from 6 to 8. These organizations have a good pulse of the labor market demand and can provide timely feedback on improving CTE offerings. And the second is it would require the CTE committee to compile a list of all career colleges and the skilled trade programs in the state for school counselors to share with high school students. This is particularly important for the over 110,000 Maryland students that are currently enrolled in our CTE courses, so they can have a more comprehensive understanding of the post-secondary offerings to make informed choices. We all recognize the pressing workforce shortage issues for trade and career jobs that often require more than a higher school diploma, but less than a four-year college. Yet the default emphasis in our public schools is oftentimes still on 2-year and 4-year degrees, with limited exposure to trade and career school options. At the same time, we all know that the average Maryland college graduate is facing $40,000 in debt. So by promoting career and trade school options, we are providing a viable education and career pathway to middle class. And I'm pleased that this bill has received broad cross-sector support from labor, business, and the local school and workforce development boards. So with that, thank you very much, and I'm going to turn to my witnesses.
And members of the committee, I am Tafia Pringle, the Director of Career Services at Lincoln College of Technology, here to urge a favorable support for HB 143, which was passed, as Delegate Chi mentioned, in both House and Senate. By way of background, Lincoln offers education in automotive technology, electrical and electronic systems technology, HVAC, culinary arts, baking and pastry, and welding and metal fabrication. The programs lead to either a certificate or an associate degree. Over the last 10 years, we have graduated more than 4,500 skilled workers who stay in Maryland, all fill key skilled trade jobs, and contribute to the state's economy. Lincoln is constantly assessing the workforce conditions in Maryland and identifying where workforce shortages are arising. In 2019, we invested $1 million to establish our welding programs after recognizing the pending shortfall in the workforce. We're investing another $700,000 this year to add 20 more welding stations because our program has grown so rapidly. Of note is that we had 100% placement of graduates in that program's first year. Lincoln Tech and similar schools can play a vital role sharing workforce insights with the Career and Technical Education Committee to ensure the curriculum being introduced is maximized to meet the workforce needs of the state. This bill can be an important tool for Maryland students to continue their passion they gain by participating in a high school CTE course. Maryland has more than 100,000 high school students currently enrolled in CTE courses. And while many will go on to 2- and 4-year colleges, career schools and skilled trade programs offer an affordable opportunity to students who wish to continue with their career-specific education. HB 143 ensures that students are provided with a list of all career colleges and skilled trade programs, as they are at least equipped with the information to make an informed decision on their post-secondary path. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I urge the favorable report on HB 143.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ellie Cowan here on behalf of Lincoln Tech. I won't belabor any of the great points made by my colleagues here and the sponsor. This bill passed both chambers, was on the governor's desk Unfortunately, because of amendments made last year, he vetoed it. Those amendments are no longer in this bill. This is the clean bill from last year that passed. And I think, you know, I was really struck this afternoon by the words of our new governor during his State of the State, where he said, education can take many forms, and that we need to end the myth that young people must attend college to be successful. I think this bill, HB 143, would go a long way in allowing high school students to know that there are other options besides 2- and 4-year schools, and options that can provide lucrative careers. So we urge a favorable report of this bill, and you know, if anyone has any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you.
I'm Jeffrey Guido. I'm here on behalf of the Baltimore DC Metro Building Trades Council. We support House Bill 143. We look forward to having the opportunity of our apprenticeship programs presented to the students coming out of high school. We currently spend around $24 million annually on apprenticeship training. We award these what we call scholarships to these apprenticeship applicants because there is no tuition cost to the apprentice. Once an applicant has been accepted, they are found employment and they begin to earn while they learn. Most of our apprenticeship schools do 8 hours once every 2 weeks during the day as part of a safety reason because of the early morning hours when they start work at 6 a.m. to 2:30 and then have to go to school at night. It became unfeasible. Went to day school for that reason. One thing is not well known is most of our apprenticeship programs offer anywhere from 35 to 45 college credits upon completion. And for this reason, we're looking forward to working with the schools and the CTE programs, and we support, urge a favorable report on House Bill 143. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Delegate Chi, thanks for bringing forward the bill. I think a lot of school systems actually supporting this, right? So what's the reason the former governor opposed the amendment? What are the amendments there?
I think one of the amendments would decouple the CTE committee and take it out of the governor's workforce development board, and that was the reason the governor vetoed that.
Thank you.
Delegate Miller.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. How many career colleges are in the state of Maryland? Since it's a separate category for. Okay, I'm just curious because like you have a whole, I'm just curious as how that compares to like community college numbers and things, or if you're counting some of the community college programs in as a career type. Thank you.
Any other questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Grayson Wiggins, please come up, and then we have someone virtually.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Grayson Wiggins here on behalf of Employ Prince George's. We are or Employ Prince George's is the fiscal administrative agent for the local workforce development board in Prince George's County. We're one of the local boards that Delegate Chi mentioned. We like the bill. We like it so much, we'd like to be included. And so we would like to, the amendment that we have would add a member or representative from a local workforce development board. There are 12 in the state. Everyone here has a local workforce development board that offers services in your area. They're federally codified. They receive state, federal funding, and local funding, and they provide on-the-ground CTE services across the state, depending on which board the relevant jurisdiction is in, or which relevant jurisdiction the board is in. And I want to thank the sponsor for speaking with me before the hearing. And my understanding is it's a friendly amendment, and it's a minute flat.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you.
And he and my son have the same name, so. Okay, we have someone virtually, but I don't think they're here, but I'm gonna call them Deborah Carr. She is not in the waiting room, I don't think. Okay, so, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 143. Calling House Bill 69, Delegate Long. Whenever you're ready, Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and my esteemed colleagues. Delegate Bob Long, for the record, here to testify on HB 69, Education Student Behavior Parent Notification Require Counseling, and it's a Parent Accountability Act. We've heard here time and time again of the working conditions that our teachers have to deal with at our different schools. I was very, when the governor talked about, what he had went through and, what woke him up was a pair of handcuffs in the back of a police car. And look where he's come now. And the reason, I really do believe in my heart of hearts, the reason he did that happened was because of his mother had to make a really hard decision. And that was to send him to military school, if I'm correct. And now he's a governor. Sometimes we need a little kick in the rear end, I guess you want to say that, or get people's attention, especially in schools. The disruptions in schools is just out of hand. We're not only having students being disrupted, we're having parents come into school and actually breaking in, or not breaking in, but bullying their way in to get to teachers. You can't blame teachers. I wouldn't want to be a teacher in this kind of climate. And that's what this bill is, what we're trying to do is get people's attention, especially the parents. Being a parent, as we all know, is not an easy job. Sometimes we have to make some hard decisions. And again, one of the things that really woke me up is I think 3 out of the top schools in Maryland with the highest suspension rate and discipline problem is actually in my district. That's alarming. I understand they've actually had parents break in or, push their way in to get the teachers. You can't blame a teacher. My wife worked at a Catholic school, was even getting back, she retired now, but it was even getting so bad back in her class or in her school that, parents busting their way in and wanting to talk to a teacher. We know our teachers are overworked and they're overstressed. We need to bring calm back into our schools, and I believe this might be the first thing that we can do. If not, open up a conversation. I think we need to go back to the old school way of doing things, and that's requiring people to have respect. And, if you break the law, you have to be accountable. If we don't, I believe that only makes even things worse when they get older. Anyway, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Delegate Long? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Long. Is Dana Schultz here or Levi Bradford? Come up, please. And I believe Dana Schultz is no longer with us. Mr. Bradford, come up and whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. My name is Levi Bradford. I'm an attorney with the Public Justice Center's Education Stability Project. We are a part of the Maryland Coalition to Reform School Discipline, which is committed to making discipline responsive to students' behavioral needs and designed to keep kids on track to graduate. We oppose House Bill 69, which mandates that parents secure counseling at their own expense and under threat of criminal prosecution if their children are suspended from school. Yes, counseling can be helpful and should be more accessible to more people. However, House Bill 69 will not effectively address challenging student behaviors and will inflict harm on parents. This bill penalizes parents rather than improving the accessibility of counseling for students, and it does nothing to increase the availability of school-based mental health services, which are currently in woefully short supply. While experts recommend schools have one counselor for every 250 students, Maryland has one for every 332 students. This bill does nothing to address that, and it won't move the needle towards ensuring students who struggle with behavior actually get the counseling that could help improve their behavior. Instead, The bill threatens parents with jail time for failing to get counseling, so parents who cannot afford it face criminal penalties for their income status. This bill requires counseling after 2 incidents of, quote, violent and disruptive behavior, which in school discipline terms can mean roughhousing a little too loudly. Instead of increasing access to counseling for children in need, this bill merely raises the hammer of the court over the heads of families who need support and not threats. House Bill 69 doesn't dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline. In fact, it feeds it by funneling parents into it along with their kids. Children rearing is not done under threat of jail. It is not done by a court order. It is done in community. It is done by parents, grandparents, neighbors, church members, educators, after-school programs. It's not done by judges. For these reasons and the reasons in our written testimony, we ask that you give an unfavorable report to House Bill 69. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bradford? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is Mr. McAvoy in the waiting room virtually? Okay, he is not there. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 69. Delegate Wells, House Bill 153. And you can bring up anyone who has remained with us that was just you. They know you can handle it.
I don't know. I'm just kidding. Oh, okay. Thank you. For the record, I'm Delegate Wells, presenting today on HB 53. So this is a bill that you all have heard previously. It passed last year, and it was on the governor's desk and was vetoed. This bill would basically do 2 things. It would provide the student member of the board on the Baltimore School I'm tongue-tied today. Baltimore City School Commissioners. It would provide them with a little bit more that they can vote on. It would exclude their ability to vote on collective bargaining and personnel matters, and then it would also establish a commission to study the feasibility of allowing compensation for school board members. This bill has already been supported by the Baltimore City delegation again this year, and I am asking for the committee's full support again, as they did last year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Wells? Delegate Ebersol.
That students are really competent members of a board and should be compensated in a similar manner to other members and treated so.
Wait, ask your question again. I'm so sorry.
That you like student members of the board.
Yes, we do. We believe that student members of the board are more than capable of engaging and can handle a lot of the various issues that come before the board, with the exception of personnel and collective bargaining. And the idea of compensation, because I spent a lot of time working with the Votes Coalition, with school commissioners, and with the student members, and they actually contribute a lot of their time. Many of them basically to be on the commission, it is almost like having a second job in some cases. So we want to be able to allow more people to participate and to at least provide some level of compensation, but we have to figure out how we can compensate them, where the money will come from. So that's why we're doing the commission.
Any other questions for Delegate Wells? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Wells. I will just, for the record, call Rick Pitts or Christina Duncan Evans, and they are not here. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 153. Calling House Bill 175, Delegate Ebersol, and there is one person who should be in the waiting room testifying virtually. No, I think they're there. Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Eric Ebersol. I am reoffering a bill that was passed by this committee, or most of the members of this committee, and the House and the Senate last year, but was unfortunately vetoed. This would be a bill similar to Delegate Wells, probably slightly different, that would simply say that student members, among the prohibitions that they have in voting, one should not be on the budget. It stands to reason to me that if you can vote on policy, but you can't vote on the budget to support it, often it's not a vote on policy at all. And so in my years of teaching, and for those of you who don't know it, because I say it just about every time I'm on a mic, I spent 35 years in the high schools. Maybe, I'm not sure. I can't remember what I taught anymore. It's gone. The student members of the board work a little harder than other members of the board, not because the other members of the board don't work hard, but they have a bias to overcome because people see them as kids, and they have to prove out how well they know things. And I've watched the people who have become members of the board, and I've watched how hard they've worked. Now, somebody will give me a litany of reasons why kids that age aren't allowed to do things, but the analogy is this. We get the best students that come there, and so because you don't think your next door neighbor is qualified to be president, it doesn't mean no one is qualified to be president. And so because you know some kids that are a little responsible and are growing up and are dealing with it, we find the good ones here. There is a very good process for picking them. And if you meet them, and I think we're going to meet one here, I'm not positive, you're going to find them to be articulate and sharp and well-studied. And so we got this bill passed. The governor vetoed it last year because there was litigation saying perhaps people that age shouldn't be allowed to serve on a school board because they can't vote. That court case has been solved. We have been given wide jurisdiction in deciding who can and who cannot be on a school board from this body. And so I'm bringing it back, and I think we're going to get the Senate to pass it too. Baltimore County is considering it, and we'll have a letter soon for you.
And we will call virtually Miss Isabella Maluzia. And whenever
Hi.
you're ready, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name is Isabella Malizia. I understand that we've been here a long day, so I'll just make this kind of nice and quick. I'm currently a research and policy fellow, and I'm representing Common Cause Maryland today as we are in favor of HB 175, which would allow the student member of the Board of Education, or SMOB, to vote on capital and operating budget matters. Currently, the Baltimore County SMOB votes on all issues except collective bargaining, capital and operating budgets, school openings and closures, and boundaries. But we believe that expanding the power to vote on capital and operating budget matters is imperative, and find the SMOB's input on funding to be critical because allocation of funds directly impacts the students of Baltimore County, whether it be something like technological improvements, replacing air conditioning, renovations, etc. As of the 2024 school year, the proposed operating budget has increased by 5.5% and sits at about $95 million and is proposed to be used for a 10-year renovation project. If giving the voting rights to capital and operating budgets, the SMOB would have the opportunity to not only learn how the civic process includes budget allocation, but make the decisions that would directly impact the students around them for years to come. The SMOB is a position that is a foray into further civic engagement, and Common Cause Maryland is working to build the next generation of future democracy leaders. And by extending their power to vote on capital and operating budgets, therefore enabling them to see how their voice can impact the processes to enact policy and action. I yield my time back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being patient and sticking with it and remaining till the end of the day. We appreciate it, and I know Delegate Ebersol appreciates it. Are there any questions for either of these folks? Yes, Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. I know it's getting late in the day. Totally for students participating in this decision-making process. And, you know, as time goes on, and we've been in this committee now for 9 years, we're seeing, and as you alluded to, an expansion of their abilities, what they can vote on. There's backing up with courts. So as they approach what I'll call a full member, right, the ability to vote, to weigh in, to debate, to do all of the things that a school board person can do, don't we also have to look at giving the same latitude with the process in which they are selected?
I don't know what latitude you're referring to.
They have all of the powers now. They're approaching all of the powers that the school board members have, but they're being picked by someone. What, the student body? How are they?
Not, you know, it's too bad. I actually told the student members not to come because I saw sponsor only. And they very responsibly said, okay, we'll stay away. They could answer that question a little better than I could in Baltimore County. It varies from county to county. My general understanding is that in Baltimore County, they are nominated from schools, and then the student government picks from among the nominees in that way.
Okay. But all of these legislative matters that you've put forward here, they don't specify on how the person gets elected or appointed or chosen or selected.
Now I'd have to check. That's not what this bill's about, but I'd have to check that. It's a complicated law. It's got a lot of pages.
Yeah, I think where I'm going with this is if they are going to truly have all of the powers that a school board members have, we need to start looking at the selection process for them and making sure it's in line with.
And I'm going to correct that they don't have all the powers, and this bill doesn't purport to give them all the powers. There's a number of things. I think Delegate Wells went through a list of them, personnel matters, a number of other things. But this would extend one more power to them for voting for certain.
They're definitely over the halfway point.
I will point out, too, that the bill was amended last year that we required a training on the budget of the student member, and then we thought, hey, isn't that a great idea? Let's have all the school board members get trained when they first come into office on understanding a budget that in Baltimore County exceeds $2 billion.
Yeah, I would actually recommend that for the
It's
elected members.
Well, it would be, yeah, we could use it too, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Delegate Ebersol, if you could just go back to when you spent time in Howard County. It's my recollection that the Howard County Student Board member goes through a significant vetting process because they have a significant election, and actually it can be quite competitive.
They are actually elected in Howard County by the entire group of, I think, high schoolers or juniors and seniors.
Right.
I can't remember what they leave it to.
I mean, they campaign.
Right.
They talk about issues.
They do.
They have a whole forum. So at least in our county, I guess every county is different. Okay. Delegate Wu.
I've never met a SMOB that I didn't like, let's say that.
Madam Chair, I can weigh in on that. So in Howard County, the SMOB was elected by grader from 6 to 12.
Oh, that's true.
From every school, we call it student delegates, and then they have a convention like that.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you, Delegate Ebersol. Stay right there. Thank you, Miss. I don't want to mispronounce your last name, so I'm going to say Miss Isabel. Thank you for joining us today. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 175. Rounding out our day, House Bill 185, Delegate Ebersol, and we have a special guest in the House. To the real smarts on this panel is Ms. Tara Ebersol. So welcome and thank you for waiting all day.
Can we hold
to be
hands at
here.
the desk? I just want to know. No, we will not.
Thank you.
I am. Oh, phew. Did it get warm in here all of a sudden? I'm not sure.
Okay, pull it together, Delegate.
Okay, here we go.
Pull it
Here we go.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, corporal punishment. If you look at the records or any research on it, it shows it to be ineffective in altering behavior and actually can be quite physically, mentally damaging. And physically, actually. The kind of corporal punishment that my wife is going to describe to you in her testimony is going to be something that would easily be characterized as assault if it was done in public between adults. And so hitting a child with a board would be okay in a state that allows corporal punishment, but would not be okay in public. And Maryland moved forward only in the mid-90s to prohibit corporal punishment in the state. It was my understanding it was still going on in some locations. That was in the mid-90s, but the article that it was put into was an article on public education. So the law says you cannot have corporal punishment in a public school, and it's silent on other institutions. And it's necessary for us to make sure that at all educational institutions and child cares across the state, it is understood that corporal punishment is a prohibited behavior and that we not hurt children to try to discipline them. And so we have crafted a law that will add those institutions into that prohibition. And I came to this bill because this person sitting next to me here actually has an experience with corporal punishment, but also an experience with doing some research. And so my testimony has come to a close.
Start?
Yes.
All right. All right, thank you, Delegate. Many thanks. I have just completed writing a novel based loosely on my first year of teaching and spent some time doing research to support my work. I began teaching in 1980 in a school in East Tennessee, and I was shocked to find that corporal punishment was still legal then. I was even more surprised to learn that Maryland did not officially prohibit corporal punishment in public schools until 1993, although many jurisdictions had already done away with that practice. Maryland did not and has not yet banned the practice in private schools, and I have confidential anecdotal information that it is still happening in our state and causing the same levels of emotional trauma. I found it traumatic for me as a teacher to administer as it was for the students receiving corporal punishment. I was able to create classroom policies and procedures that kept student behavior in check. However, there were school rules where it was required of me. For example, if a student came to class late, I was expected to take a 2-foot-long wooden paddle, have the student stand in the hallway, bent over with their hands on the lockers while I gave them one lick. If a board of this size were used to strike someone in any other situation, it would constitute assault. While there are some states that have removed the practice from all of their educational institutions, such as Iowa and New Mexico, Maryland is not one of them. Since not all incidents of corporal punishment are reported, it is challenging to collect accurate data. However, it appears that nationally, over 100,000 children are impacted annually, and corporal punishment is used disproportionately on children in poverty, children of color, and children with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for either Ebersol? Okay, seeing none, thank you both. There were two other people, I don't know if they're still here, Maddie Long and Laura Stewart. Yep, come on up, please. Yes, it is.
Extremely favorable.
Whenever you're ready.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Laura Stewart. I am here as the Vice President for Advocacy for Free State PTA, the statewide PTA organization which represents over 50,000 volunteer members and families in over 500 public schools. I'm also representing Maryland Education Coalition today. I am testifying in support of House Bill 185, which prohibits non-public schools and child care providers from enacting corporal punishment. This bill requires the State Board of Education to prohibit corporal punishment for the registration of family and large family child care homes and the licensing and operation of child care centers. This aligns with our PTA's principle for legislative action, which states that schools must provide a safe environment where all students, teachers, and staff can thrive. The American Psychological Association, World Health Organization, and many other entities have determined that corporal punishment may lead to increased aggression, antisocial behavior, physical injury, and mental health problems for children. Not only has corporal punishment been shown to affect a child's future behavior, it negatively affects their health, leading to psychological stress, physiological stress, and the activation of neural pathways that support dealing with danger. Children who have been physically punished tend to exhibit high hormonal reactivity to stress, which can lead to cardiovascular problems and changes in brain structure. This form of punishment is not consistent with trauma-informed education. Groups like UNICEF recommend positive discipline as an alternative to corporal punishment. I'd like to add my mom was also a teacher in Tennessee and had to inflict corporal punishment on her students. We suggest training child care centers and parents are more positive alternatives, so we need to do the education for everyone. Free State PTA believes this bill is vital in ensuring the well-being of children and therefore strongly urges that the committee issues a favorable report on HB 185.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Yes, Delegate Buckle.
So my friend, this seems like a no-brainer, and so I can't be missing anything. This seems obvious. Is anyone opposed to this? I mean, any of these child care centers or private schools, or I mean, it seems to me like it's a pretty straightforward thing. I'm just wondering, who would be opposed to this?
I just want to clarify, are you throwing me a softball?
I'm just trying to move the day along, buddy.
Right,
See if we
we're done.
move favorably.
Yes, child care centers too are all in. They think it's important to clarify in their setting that children can't be struck.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Delegate Buckle, we received 2 letters that were unfavorable, one from Vince McAvoy. Any other questions for any members that testified today? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony.
Thank you all for
House
staying to the
Bill
end. Yep.
185, and that concludes the hearings for today. Thank you.